Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Luffy fanfics, back with the amazing fanfiction. This is the third part of What If Luffy, Ace, and Sabo raised and trained by Whitebeard. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. This was the first time in over a year that Garp had come to visit his grandsons and Whitebeard. Also the first time he'd be meeting Trafalgar Law. Law's first impression of the old man wearing a marine uniform was suspicious at best, especially after the fist of loves he sent to Ace and Sabo, and was thoroughly confused when he dawdled on Luffy. That was until Ace and Sabo introduced him as their adopted grandpa and Luffy's blood grandpa. He still wasn't comfortable with the fact that Garp seemed to somehow know about his relationship with Korasan just after hearing he willingly joined the Don Quixote pirates when he was a young suicidal kid and that he was from North Blue. Why did Ace and Sabo tell him? Did you happen to meet a man by the name of Rocinante? Yes, Law answered cautiously. While he knew Korasan worked as an undercover marine, he didn't know how much the Marines knew. On the other hand, this man was his brother's grandpa. He was an undercover marine, the second Corazon in Joker's family, and the psychopath's blood brother. Why do you ask? Garp laughed and patted the teen's back a little too hard. You're that kid with the amber lead syndrome Rocinante ditched his duties to save. Glad to see you made it, kid. He laughed some more before sobering and looking to his grandsons. That gives me an idea. You boys think we can meet somewhere away from all this pirate business? There's someone I'd like you to meet. A month later, the boys were on the same island that burned down just over a year ago. They came as often as they could to plant new greenery on the island that they've claimed as their own. It's not much, but there are some new bushes and small trees growing. They're working on making it as green as it used to be. Divided by. Damn it, Garp, where are you taking me? Sengoku complained from his seat on their unmarked ship. He watched as the only other person on the ship looked down at a Vivre card and adjusted their course accordingly. Just sit tight, Sengoku. We're almost there. That's what you said 2 days ago, the fleet admiral grumbled. I think that's it. Garp pointed to a small lump in the distance. You think? What do you mean you think? Do you even know where we're going? They were close to the tiny island when a loud roar was heard and then a familiar voice. No, they're okay, Mr. Guardian. The one with lots of gray hair is Grandpa. Hi, Grandpa. Luffy waved at them from atop a very large sea king. Luffy, what are you doing in the middle of the sea? Garp yelled at him, not in the least intimidated by the sea king. Did you forget you can't swim? Luffy laughed. It's okay. I have this. He held up the bubbly coral he'd gotten many years ago from Fishman Island. And Mr. Guardian won't let me drown. Right. He looked down on the sea king he sat on. It gave a small growl before tossing Luffy into the air and diving underwater and catching the boy before he hit the ocean. Get off that thing this instant. Garp roared, sensing the intense worry from his grandpa. Luffy jumped off the Sea King and onto the small ship. Well, Garp looked his grandson expectantly. Well, what? What were you doing in the middle of the sea? You didn't answer my question. Oh, the boy drawled out and smiled. Waiting for you. I wanted to make sure Mr. Guardian doesn't eat you. Mr. Guardian, huh? The Vice Admiral narrowed his eyes at the Sea King swimming alongside them. Yeah, he's awesome. He protects our island and waters our plants. As if to show off, the Sea King swam ahead of them and flapped his tail, sending a wave large enough to engulf the island, where the three humans could hear some shouts. Luffy laughed and cheered when the Sea King came back to tow the ship to shore. 3 angry and wet teenagers ran up to them and each one of them bopped the young teen on the head. That was then followed by the fists of love. Law stumbled as he wasn't excluded like last time. What hell was that for, you crazy old man? That is punishment for hitting Luffy, Garp laughed. Sengoku sighed at Garp's usual antics. Garp, please tell me why you brought me here. Wherever here is. I have no idea where we are, Garp said with a finger up his nose. Used to be Green Island, Sabo answered. Huh, what kind of name is that? Garp asked. Lua named it. It really used to be green until it burned down. We're trying to grow back the plants, Law answered. We didn't do it. Both Ace and Sabo yelled at their grandpa's look. Right, Sengoku sighed again. So why am I here? Why, to meet your grandson, of course, Garp beamed. Garp, his superior heaved another sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. It was all he does around his old friend nowadays. You and I both know I have no children to have any grandchildren. True, but you, Otsuru. And I all know that you thought of Rocinante as your own son. Sengoku snapped his head towards the boys, then looked at Law, who spoke with a scowl. I'm not calling you grandpa. Come on, boys. Why don't you show your grandpa your island? Garp led the other 3 away. Sengoku dropped himself on the sand where they stood and looked pointedly at Law to do the same. What's your name? He finally said after a moment of them gauging each other. Trafalgar Law. The Marine sighed and dropped his head, relief clear in his voice. I'm glad Rocinante's death wasn't in vain. Tell me about those 6 months that he disappeared off our radar with you. Was he happy? Were you happy with him? How did you get along? tell me anything. It's been far too long since I've heard of him. You know, he told me about a crazy kid with Amber Lead syndrome joining his brother's gang. Then all of a sudden he calls to tell me he's going to find a cure for the damn kid and disappears for half a year. The last I heard from him, he tipped us off about Doflamingo wanting to steal the Opus Opus fruit. That was also the first time he's lied to me. He said he wouldn't be there. I told him to not go, since I knew it would be dangerous. He shouldn't have been there. He pounded the sand in anguish. Law took a deep breath and gathered his thoughts. He could hear how much the old man next to him cared for Kora-san and realized he's talked about himself more in the last year or so than he has in his entire life. He told Sengoku everything from those torturous 6 months to the spy, the first Corazon. He told of how the man who cared for him laughed and how clumsy he was, of his many times of burning his own coat and tripping over nothing. He left nothing out, even things he hasn't told anyone else yet, because of how close he wanted to keep them to himself. And yet, he felt he should tell this man who mourns the loss of a person who thought of him as a son. Sengoku laughed sadly. So he died with a smile, did he? I'm glad that he died doing something that made him happy. But Virgo, I'll keep an eye on him. It wouldn't do to out him yet. Doflamingo may send someone else to infiltrate the Marines. Now, tell me about yourself. How have you been avoiding Doflamingo? And how the hell did you end up with Garp's grandsons anyway? I've been island hoping and keeping an ear out for Doflamingo's men. As for those three, Law trailed off, not knowing how to explain that he'd join Whitebeard. Guard did specifically request this meeting to be away from the pirates. There with Whitebeard, Garp said seriously, as he walked towards them without the 3 boys. He held out a hand before his boss could chew them out. They're safe there. It's why I willingly left my precious grandsons with him. Sengoku, Newgate saved my boys when the Marines couldn't do anything. How did you end up with Whitebeard of all people? Luffy, you found me, knocked out 2 of Joker's men that were after me, even though I didn't need the help, and dragged me off to their birthday party. One thing led to another, and I stayed. Law looked confused at the turn of events. Let's just say I got kidnapped by the kid. It's been almost 2 years since. He then had a horrified look as their ship came to view. This caused the 2 Marines to turn their heads to look behind them. Garp, Sengoku growled as the boat with a black flag with the ASL symbol over Whitebeard's expertly came to a stop right next to their smaller ship. Before you say anything, it's just my 3. Law has nothing to do with it, and they have a very good reason for attacking that base. They took Sabo from them just because some noble paid them to, Garp explained. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, and that's their own personal ship, Flight for Freedom. Sengoku sobered, remembering what a distraught Garp had once said years back about his missing grandson and again a year later with the same news about his other 2 grandsons. All he ever wanted was for them to live freely. Is what Blackbeard said about you true? You work for pirates. Sengoku, my job is important to me, but so is my family, especially those 3. If by the off chance they're ever caught by the Marines, it's because they're stupid for being caught. That will be their own fault. I won't do anything to help them. Just know that Whitebeard nor my grandsons would never attack anyone unprovoked. So what will it be, Fleet Admiral? Garp said challengingly. There goes another sigh. Why is it so tiring to deal with this man? I can't let you go, Garp. You know that. You're too valuable to the Marines, even if you are a pain in the ass. What can I do? It seems I also have a pirate grandson. He ignored Law's protest of not being his grandson. I guess we old people will just have to watch over them the best we can and hope for the best. Got any more senbei? Garp took a seat next to his old friend and held out his open pack of rice crackers, as the 3 of them watched the 3 boys get off their ship and argue with each other. You know, I'm glad my grandson isn't as idiotic as your 3, Sengoku said. For your information, Law thought my Luffy was a girl for a good 2 weeks, Garp said smugly. Sengoku spat out his senbei and turned to give Law an incredulous look. How can you mistaken that for a girl? It was a prank the whole ship was on. They introduced him to me as a girl. He was wearing a dress, and it actually looked good on him, Law defended himself. Watch. Luya, come here. He waited for the boy to come close to them and opened up his travel bag to hand over a dress. Try it on. Luffy cheered at receiving a new dress and took of his t-shirt and held his arms up, waiting for Law to put it on for him. See, cute. Law pointed to Luffy, who was spinning in his new dress. The cross-dressing boys soon dragged Law over to where Ace and Sabo were, leaving the 2 Marines, one smug and one baffled. Garp, please tell me he isn't Dragon's son. I can't. There's no way. How did that happen? I have no idea. Are you even sure that's her grandson? Garp shrugged. They say his name's Luffy, and he's around the right age. Too many coincidences. What am I to say? I think he is. He even looks a little like his dad when he was younger. The both sat in silence, watching the boys argue with wild gestures with Luffy laughing at the 3 of them. Then the 3 older boys were on top of each other, throwing punches, kicks, and rolling around the sand. How old are they supposed to be? Law's 18 and the other 2 are 16. Luffy's 13. Garp grinned at the sight of the boys being boys. Are you sure they're not 8 and 6? Leave them be. Those 3 haven't had much of a normal childhood. Not that it's normal now, but at least they're able to relax. They sat in comfortable silence until Ace and Sabo held up both of their fiery fists. As the 3 of them stood in a light blue circular-like room and Law held up his sword at them. Think we should stop them? Sengoku asked, slightly surprised at the fire being produced by 2 separate persons. Never in his very many years of working in the Marines has he ever heard of 2 people with the same devil fruit powers at the same time. But right now, he's more worried about the kids harming themselves. He can ask about their powers later. Who knows, maybe they were 2 different fruits with almost similar powers. That might be a good idea, Garp said as he furrowed his brows and got up. My 2 older ones tend to get out of hand. Or so I heard. The 2 got up to walk to the teens. They saw Luffy, who was laughing at his brothers, turn his head to wave at them with a grin, but the grin dropped and he looked back to his fighting brothers and back to the older pair and back to his brothers. The next thing they knew, Ace, Sabo, and Law were sent sailing out towards the middle of ocean. Law, Sengoku screamed as he ran towards the beach, but they were too far away for him to swim or get the boat to them in time. Not that he could remember that he couldn't swim either. Garp, on the other hand, stomped right to Luffy, who had grinned at him but then looked terrified, and gave him a haki-infused fist right on the head. The boy clutched his head in pain and looked up to his grandpa with tears in his eyes. Grandpa hit me, he sniffled. That hurts. Sengoku had walked up to them and placed a hand on Garp's shoulder. They're fine, the Fleet Admiral said in relief. Garp turned his head to look over his shoulder and gave his boss a look of confusion. Of course they're fine. Why wouldn't they be? Your grandson just sent your other 2 grandsons and my grandson flying out to the middle of the ocean and none of them can swim. Why aren't you more worried? That confirms it. He's defiantly your grandson. No one else would be stupid enough to do something like that. Sengoku felt the sudden need to throw the man into the ocean. As a matter of fact, why wasn't your first reaction to swim out there to save them? Oh, that's because Luffy would never intentionally hurt those boys, Garp stated. How can you be so sure of that? Who knows what kinds of things he's been learning from living with pirates? Sengoku pointed an accusing finger at the young teen. You want to fight? Luffy asked with his fists raised and ready for the irate Marine. Luffy. They all turned to look towards the ocean where the voices came from. Law, Ace, and Sabo were standing on the head of the Sea King Luffy had been on earlier. The 3 of them jumped off as soon as the Sea King brought them close enough. Ace and Sabo both hit Luffy on the head as Law stood protectively between them and the Marine. Don't fight him, Ace and Sabo said as they both sent their fists down. But why? Because he's the Marine boss. Yeah, but... No, Luya, Law cut in tiredly. Why did you hit us with your bazooka? Oh, because Grandpa's friend wanted you to stop fighting, Luffy said proudly with a smile. So, his 3 brothers asked with their arms crossed, as if the response was stupid. He was worried for Trow. He raised both hands happily in the air in a cheer. Your grandpa was worried about you. Law turned to give Sengoku a glare. So you think I wouldn't be able to beat those 2? Sengoku pinched the bridge of his nose. Here I thought you were the older, more responsible, more reasonable of the group. Believe me, I am, Law deadpanned. Garp smacked the older teen on the back with a laugh. Don't be like that. Senny, here, was worried about you boys using your devil's fruit and things getting out of hand. But we do that all the time. How else are we supposed to train? Ace and Sabo argued. There's no arguing that, Garp said to his boss. That didn't mean the little one had to throw you into the ocean to get you boys to stop, Sengoku sighed. Luya wouldn't have done that if you weren't needlessly worried about us. Law crossed his arms as he glared at Sengoku. Must have been really worried if Luffy had to resort to sending us out to the Guardian, Ace said with a grin. That must have made him worry even more, Ace. Sabo smacks the back of his brother's head before turning to Luffy. Lu, if you knew Trow's grandpa was worried, why did you bazooka us out to sea? Because that was the fastest way to stop you, he said with a smile before he frowned. I didn't think it'd scare him though. Luya, Law moaned with his hand on his face. 3 devil's fruit users getting tossed into the ocean. Who wouldn't be worried? We can't swim, he explained when the boy looked confused. Normal people would be worried about us drowning. They don't know that the Sea King out there would save us. Ooh, now that you understand, apologize for scaring the old geezer, Sabo said. The Fleet Admiral sputtered at his new title. The 13-year-old walked up to the Fleet Admiral and bowed. Please accept my humble apology scaring you shitless. He got up from his bow, ignoring the 2 older men's look of surprise, to look at Sabo. Did I do that right? His 3 brothers were stifling their laughter the boy's wordings. Almost, Sabo said breathless from holding in his laugh. It's not for scaring you shitless. It should be for startling you with my thoughtless act. Oh, okay. Luffy turned back around to bow at Sengoku once more. Please accept my humble apology for startling you with my thoughtless act. He looked back up to see both men looking baffled. Why? Garp finally managed to ask. Why what? Both Ace and Sabo asked back with twin grins. Why did you do that to my Luffy? Garp yelled at them. Why not? Law smirked. I don't see any problems with it. I find it quite amusing. A pirate with the words of high nobility. Sabo, Garp said threateningly with his fist raised. There's a very good reason for this, I swear. Sabo quickly defended himself from Garp's fist of law. He heaved a relieved sigh when Garp lowered his fist. I thought it'd be a good idea to teach him and Ace some manners, since, they both were never taught any. And you do have to admit, Ace did have the foulest mouth you could ever find on a kid. You really did, Ace. It's just not as bad now. And well, Luffy needs to learn too, right? Wait. He covered his head with his arms when Garp raised his fist once more. Trow, and I thought it'd be funny to teach Luffy to be super polite. He risked opening his left eye to see what Garp's reaction was. To his surprise, Garp sighed and ran his hand over his face in resignation. Whatever. It's not like I have much say in how you raise the brat. How's his studying going anyway? Great. Law ruffled Luffy's hair, causing the boy to giggle. He's even reading some of my medical books. He doesn't understand a thing in them, but he's reading them. That's because he doesn't pay attention to what he picks up. Ace groaned. He just reads whatever he gets his hands on. And then someone has to explain whatever he doesn't understand. It's so annoying. Most of the time, the explanation ends up being a mystery. Yeah, but at least now everyone's learned to hide their personal stash, Sabo laughed. Once, he picked up one of Vista's porn novel. We told Luffy to go read it to Grandpops. That was so funny. Everyone stopped what they were doing and listened to him read it until Vista finally realized it was his book that was being read out loud and took it from him. How far into the book did he get? And when was this? Garp moaned in his hand. From here he slumped onto the sandy beach. Far enough that even Grandpops was blushing. Ace and Sabo grinned. A few days after that, Law said, someone told Marco when he came back from a mission. And the man chewed everyone off for not stopping the kid earlier and for everyone to make sure there aren't any more inappropriate things laying around. How did you boys manage to tame a sea king? Sengoku asked as he watched the sea beast swim away quickly when Luffy's stomach gave a loud growl. We have food at the house, Sabo said as he picked up his cross-dressing brother and walked away without waiting to see if the others followed. Leah promised the Sea King that we wouldn't eat it if it protect our island and water the plants while we're away, Law explained as they all followed the blonde. But how did he even get a Sea King to listen to him? Easy, Ace shrugged. He fed it. It even sometimes brings friends. Please, don't ask anymore, Garp sighed resignedly. The kid is strange. It's what happens when you let kids raise a kid. Just wait till you see their house. Law trailed back to walk with the older men. Speaking of strange kids, the three of them don't have any sexual drive. All their hormones are directed to their metabolisms and Luffy's endless stamina. Kobato-ya and Izo-ya sat them down for the talk already. None of them seem interested. Not interested? Garp gasped, then thought of something. Great-grandkids. He nearly whimpered. Might not ever happen. They don't even give beautiful women a second glance? Law shrugged. Not even good-looking men. They do seem interested in each other though. Did you know they still sleep together? He's going to leave out the fact that he sleeps with them. Garp stopped in his tracks, trying to get his thought process back in order, while everyone else continues on without him. He remembers when he was their age he was ogling women left and right. Ace and Sabo are 16. They should at least be curious about the opposite sex. Sengoku raised an eyebrow at Law's evil grin. Revenge for hitting me, Law huffed. So you lied to him? No, Law mumbled before stalking off towards the trio in front of them. Once the house was in view, Sengoku paused in his steps to study the skeletal building. It's a decent-sized home for the 4 teens. But it was the shape that was beginning to take shape that stopped him. Luffy wanted a castle, like the ones in the fairy tale books, Ace explained, knowing full well how strange it looked. He wants a moat and a drawbridge to top it off. We're lucky that he doesn't really know how big castles are supposed to be. The fleet admiral couldn't only shrug and go along with it. He's given up. He's been around Garp long enough to deal with strange things. He's also heard the man bawl his eyes out when the kids were taken and his loud boisterous cheer when he found out they were still alive. His friend never did tell him how they were rescued. Seeing that the boys were with Whitebeard, he supposed it's best that he didn't know. Ignorance is bliss, after all. Or is plausible deniability more appropriate? Now he wished Garp hadn't told him they were with Whitebeard. Who was he kidding? He'd still want to know where they were staying for his own peace of mind. Better Whitebeard than any other pirates. That brings up another question. Who's Grandpops? The Whitebeard pirates once again left New World to check up on a few islands in Paradise. They sailed here and there, to different islands to make sure there were no trouble caused in their territories. Months later, they were ready to head back. This is the 5th time Ace, Sabo, and Luffy had been here at Sabayati, the first for Law. Just like the few times they've been here, the 4 of them had to stay on the ship in fear of one of Doflamingo's men spotting them. The warlord had his hands in slave trading after all. At least this time they were hidden at Grove 89, in the uninhabited area. They were at least allowed to walk on land, as long as they stayed within Grove 85 through 89. 3 members from Division 2 stayed with them to watch over the ship and the 4 teenagers. The rest of the crew split up to buy supplies and find Rayleigh. I wish we could go to this amusement park everyone keeps talking about, Ace said as he kicked a random rock in his path. Sounds like fun. Oh, right, Bliss said from behind the 4 teenagers. You brats have never been to an amusement park before, have you? No, some of the books we've read talked about them. Sounds like fun, Sabo sighed wistfully. I want to ride one of those Ferris wheels. I heard the view from the top is beautiful. I want to ride a jet coaster. Luffy made a sound effect of a fast-moving object while moving a hand in a motion of a roller coaster. I'm almost sure being flung by your rocket is about the same. Law deadpan. Fast and dangerous. The Division 2 members laughed. Yeah, but at least jet coasters have brakes, and you wouldn't have to worry about landing on your head, Henry commented in between laughs. That's right, Prem agreed. They talked and walked around while waiting for Rayleigh, always keeping Moby Dick within sight. The ship coder came after they finished their lunch. You know, Bliss said thoughtfully as Rayleigh worked in the background, we could put you guys in a disguise. That way you can walk around, and no one would recognize you. Unless you're Luffy, Sabo grumbled, remembering the time he lost his sight. Oh, come on, Prem smacked the blonde on the back. There aren't that many people with that kind of skill. I think it's a great idea. Sabaody is a place you have to see. Besides, when Luffy decides to sail off on his own, he's going to have come here eventually to get to New World. I don't think it's a good idea. Henry said, we're going to get into so much trouble. Marco specifically said to not let them go anywhere near the towns. But he didn't say we couldn't go if we weren't us. Can't get in trouble if they don't find out, Ace grinned. Jet coaster, Luffy cheered. Law, you're sanest of the 4. Put some sense into them, Henry begged, not wanting to get in trouble with Marco. Law tried to weigh the pros and cons but was only able to think about how happy Lou would be. Why don't we ask Rayleigh to take us after he finishes? It'd be safer with someone who knows the area. Rayleigh. Luffy took off to find the old ship coder. Rayleigh agreed to guide them after he finished under the condition that they listen to him. If he says they have to leave, then they leave. After he finished, he found all 4 boys, now in dresses and wigs, disguised as girls, waiting for him with the other 3 pirates. He needed to drop off his tools first, so he led them towards Shacky's at Grove 13. As soon as they stepped onto the first grove into Lawless area, Luffy paused. What's wrong, Luffy? Ace asked. I don't know. Feels weird here, was all he said before continuing walking. As they walked closer towards the middle of the archipelago, Luffy started to walk slower. Luffy, you okay? Ace asked once again. There are lots of people crying, Luffy said quietly, tears slowly coming down. Can you hear them? We don't hear anything, Luya. Are you sure? Law asked. Rayleigh stopped a few steps ahead of the group and turned back around to walk back towards them. Maybe this isn't a good idea. Let's get you boys back to the ship. He's met a few people like Luffy, who can hear the voices of people's heart. Sabaody, where slave trading is legal, isn't a place for people like them. If he'd known Luffy was one who could hear the voices, he wouldn't have agreed. The kid was too young to be able to control his emotions. Luffy nodded as he shook. He didn't like it here where he can hear so many people crying, pleading to be freed. The longer he stayed there, the more he could hear. The boy sniffled and tried to stop his tears, but they kept on coming. Law picked him up when he noticed Luffy's crying wouldn't stop. They want to be free, Luffy sniffled, burying his face into Law's shoulder. Why can't they be free? He didn't know how to answer, instead looked to the older, more experienced pirate. Rayleigh sighed and placed a hand on Luffy's head. There are things we can't change. There will always be people who thinks they are above others and nothing we do or say will make them change their minds. This is the world we live in. They were nearing Grove 20 when someone ran towards them and the many people walking around. He ran around, asking people, begging for someone to get his collar off, that he had a family to go back to. Luffy turned his head to see what was going on and tensed and shook even harder at what he saw. He knows how that man feels. He was angry that someone would do something like this to someone else. Rayleigh, sensing Luffy's mood, turned to Law. We have to get him out of here quickly before he does something stupid. The old coder could feel small amounts of haki seeping out of the small boy. Not just any type of haki, but one that few people have mastered, Conqueror's haki. Things could get a little troublesome if that was released in a place full of people. Not to mention, if that slave was here, it means the Tenryubitos aren't too far behind. But it was too late. The bomb collar went off, killing the runaway slave. Luffy stilled in shock as he saw the whole thing. Law swore could feel the boy in his arms stop breathing for a moment. Boy, don't do anything. All you can do is cause trouble. And that's something I would like to avoid, Rayleigh said in warning. 2 Tenryubitos, an older male and a female, came before they could get far enough away, causing them to hide in between 2 buildings. The Tenryubitos didn't seem to care that the man died. Instead, they just belittled him and called him names, even kicking the dead man. Law held the boy even tighter when even he felt the rage boiling. Luffy couldn't see anything that was happening from his position, but he could hear them. Law had to do something soon before Luffy does something stupid, as Rayleigh said. Rayleigh, I'm taking him back to the ship right now. Vroom. Shambles. He didn't even wait for a reply and just disappeared. They landed on Grove 83, not too far from Moby Dick. It wasn't a moment too soon as Luffy lost control over his emotions and let out his conqueror's haki, shaking the whole mangrove around them. Law was sure he even heard the one under them creak from the pressure that was released by the boy. The older boy felt weak in the knees and knelt down to keep his balance and shake his head to clear the black spots from his vision after having to put Luffy down. The poor boy looked so lost and sad, with his tears pouring out as he cried and lashed out at anything and everything in his path. Law just leaned back into a tree, leaving the boy to relieve his frustration. That is until Luffy managed to take down one of the tree with one punch. The older teen groaned, realizing that he has to somehow calm his sister down before some curious idiot comes by to see what happened. He thought about how to stop him. What can he do by himself? Hell, even some of the commanders admitted Luffy is stronger than them when he goes all out. Another tree went down, and he shakily stood up and called out to his sister. There was no way in hell his conscience would let him cut his sister, even knowing it wouldn't hurt her. Luya, calm down before someone comes by. Luffy continued on. Not hearing him, Law ran towards the boy to try to pin him, but Luffy evaded him and continued to vent his frustration at the world on another grove. This continued for another 10 minutes before Ace and Sabo showed up. They yelled Luffy's name as they also rushed at him at the same time, only to be punched by a haki-infused fist, sending them both back into a tree. The impact caused the grove to flame up, burning the poor tree. They got back up, and the three of them fought their brother. Rayleigh and the 3 Division 2 members showed up not too long after and joined in. Eventually, the old coder managed to kick Luffy in the back of his head, knocking him unconscious. Once they were sure the boy wouldn't get back up, they all slumped down in relief. Rayleigh took a look around to survey the damage. It looked like all of Grove 8-89 were gone. Even some of the roots have sunken, leaving a few small lake-like areas. From where they were, they can see their ship in plain sight, no longer hidden behind the tall trees. It didn't take long before Whitebeard's crew slowly showed up to see what had happened. The commanders, and Whitebeard being the first as they had a head start after sensing the strong haki coming from the direction of their ship. Under his captain's command, Juru quickly called everyone back to the ship. They had to leave soon. There was no way the government is going to let this one go. Someone would be here soon to investigate. Blist, Prem, and Henry apologized profusely to Marco and Whitebeard, only to be cut off by Rayleigh. No, it's my fault for agreeing to take them. I thought it wouldn't hurt if it was just for a few hours. I apologize for the lapse in judgment. Marco just heaved a sigh with a hand to his forehead. No yoy, this was bound to happen. They're teenagers who just wants to go exploring. I should have expected them to want to take a look around yoy. We also should have warned you about Luffy's ability. They were deep under the sea, halfway to Fishman Island, when Luffy woke up to seeing Whitebeard sitting on the edge of his infirmary bed, with Law, Ace, and Sabo sitting on the next bed over. I heard what happened, the old man said softly, signaling the 3 boys to stay where they were to give their brother time. Do you want to talk about it? Luffy stared at the ceiling for a minute before saying anything. Grandpups. Why, indeed. Whitebeard sighed as he looked out the window, thinking of how to answer Luffy's many questions. The Tenryubito believe themselves to be higher than the rest of the world. They believe themselves as gods. As a matter of fact, the government itself works under them. If anyone were to attack a Tenryubito, an admiral would come. That is something even I would want to avoid. Everyone, even pirates, are afraid to go against a Tenryubito because of that. Luffy nodded in understanding, even if it didn't make much sense to him. Are the Tenryubito that strong? Whitebeard continued. You should never think of the strength you have as a curse given to you by Doflamingo. Think of it as a gift to protect your friends and family. The world may think of you as a monster because of your ability and your blood, but what they think should not matter. What matters is what we, your family, think of you. Just as you can't change the color of the sun, there are things you can't change. People fear the Tenryubito. There will be slaves you can't save. Marines will always chase pirates. Fishman Island will always be under the sea. You will always be my son even when you set sail with your own crew. You need to learn to control that temper of yours. You will see many things that you won't like in the future, things you can do nothing about. We won't always be there to stop you the next time you have temper tantrum. He winked at the boy who blushed. Sorry, also, by recommendation of Rayleigh, you are not to set foot on Sabayati again for your safety and for the safety of your future crew. When the time comes where you have to stop there to get your ship coated, stay on your ship, do not get off. Rayleigh can be very scary if angered. Whitebeard chuckled. Grandpops, will I be a good captain like you? Will I be strong enough to protect my crew like you? That all depends on you. You are a good person with a very big heart. You are smarter than many people give you credit for. I, personally, think you will be a great captain. Just remember that we all have weaknesses. In order to be strong, you have to learn your weaknesses. Even I have many weaknesses. As a matter of fact, I have over 1,000 of them." Whitebeard laughed. "We, as captains, must protect our friends and family as best as we can." Luffy shifted to the side of the bed to hug Whitebeard's knee. "You're the greatest. I hope I can find a crew as great as my brothers and sisters and be a great captain like you. If I can do that, then I know I can find One Piece and be the freest person in the world." Whitebeard placed a large hand over the boy's back. "I know you will. You are my grandson. The fact that he has grandsons still brings him joy. I don't doubt that you will achieve your dream. Now, why don't you cheer up and go see your siblings? They're all worried about you. Prem, Bliss, and Henry all blame themselves for what happened, you know. Why? It's not their fault. They're not in trouble, are they?" Luffy looked at the man with worried eyes. "No, of course they're not in trouble. They just feel responsible since they were put in charge of watching over you four." Luffy hurried and scrambled out of bed and dragged Ace and Sabo, leaving Law to follow them, to find his other brothers to apologize to them. The whole ship heard what had happened and felt bad for the boy. They understood and didn't blame him for the temper tantrum. No one on board likes the thought of slavery. Once Luffy came out of the infirmary, everyone cheered and turned down his apologies since there was nothing to apologize for. Instead, they partied their way to their next destination to cheer the boy up. It didn't take much for their sun to shine brightly again. They were all laughing and joking about what the newspaper would say about the missing groves. Divided by. A day after their week-long stay at Fishman Island, the news crew delivered them the newspaper with the latest update on Sabaody Archipelago. What was written was nothing anyone guessed. Apparently there was one very brave, very curious, and very stupid news reporter that was able to witness the destruction that took place but got knocked out by a fallen tree before the rest of the Whitebeard crew arrived. He luckily was hidden behind a downed grove, or the pirates would have taken him with them to avoid having a witness. There were pictures of Luffy knocking down a tree with a single punch, Law slicing down a tree, Ace burning down a tree with a fiery punch, and Sabo burning down a tree with flames coming out of his back. Their faces showing up clear in the pictures, with their wigs having fallen off some time ago. There was also a picture of the aftermath, after a Marine found the reporter and woken him up. Someone in the Marine had recognized all four of their faces and claimed that it was the doing of a SL, although he was pretty confused as to why they were wearing female clothing this time around. The Marine's speculation was that the boys were Akamas. There were no mention of names or Whitebeard. Now the world has a clear picture to go with their wanted poster, though there are no names. Their bounty has risen again, to an amount of 60 million bali each, though they couldn't figure out if it was all four that were part of the ASL group or just 3 children from hell. ASL only had 3 letters after all. Trow is one of us now. Both Ace and Sabo declared at that section of the article. He and Luke can both be Al, Sabo concluded. The article went on to speculate that the reason for their destruction on the mangrove is because the 4 of them were having a competition as to who could take down the most grove. Well, Thatch laughed. If things didn't go the way it did, I'm almost positive that it'd be something you 4 would do. Did they have to use that picture? Sabo whined. A dress. They have a picture of me in a dress. Aw, but I think you look cute, Izo assured him. You boys should follow Lou's example and wear dresses more often. Someone get a camera, quick, Ace demanded. We're sending them a better picture. Give it up, Acia, Law sighed. This is a week-old newspaper. The whole world's already seen it. Then the next time I see one of those shitty reporter, I'm going to demand they do a retake, Ace said as he raised a flamed fist. A dress, Sabo moaned as he slumped to the floor. A dress. The whole world has a picture of me in a dress. I've lost all manliness. Me, a gentleman, in a dress. Akama. I think the worst part is now the whole world has seen Luya in a dress, Law said with a scowl. I don't understand, Luffy said, looking to Izo. What's wrong with wearing a dress? Is it wrong for me to wear a dress? No, Lou, Izo smiled at the boy. Law's just worried that people will think you're too cute and will kidnap you for themselves. Is that why Ace and Sabo want to change their picture? No, they just have no backbone. They don't understand the beauty of feminine wear. Just because you're a man does not mean you can't wear a dress. Izo glared at them, in which the two returned. Luffy is allowed to wear dresses because he wants to. And he looks good in them. Ace crossed his arm. I think you look good too. Luffy smiled at him, causing everyone to laugh at Ace's blush. What's an Akama? Akama is a man who wants to be a girl. Law gave a simple explanation. Oh, then it's okay, Luffy nodded. I'm not an Akama. I like dresses. I don't want to be a girl. I like being me. On the next island, while looking in a bookstore, Luffy excused himself from his 3 brothers, stating that he saw something he wanted. It took a while of whining that he's a big boy and that he could go out on his own, before they relented and let him go alone. There were a couple of presents that he vaguely recognized from long, long ago, ones that he wished to never come across ever again. He wanted to investigate alone as to not worry his brothers, hoping he was wrong. If he was wrong, well, he's sure that he could beat these people up. He followed the presents to a nearby alley to see a very pale-skinned, green-haired woman and a very large man wearing a golden helmet and a weird skirt waiting for him. "Hello there, little one," Monet greeted. "Enjoy your brief freedom." "Who are you?" Luffy asked with his guards up. He could tell they weren't good people. "You don't remember us, after we took such good care of you, too," the woman said with her hand to the side of her face. "I'm Monet, and this is Pika. What do you want?" Luffy growled, vaguely remembering the names that connected to Doflamingo. "Why, to bring you back to where you belong, of course," the woman laughed. "Young master has been worried about you when you just upped and disappeared 7 years ago." "I'm not going back. You can't make me," he growled with his fists up. "Oh, what about your friends?" She pointed to the bookstore. Hiska had moved under the rocky road and appeared next to the bookstore where his brothers were. Luffy's eyes widened, understanding what Piska is about to do. "Wait, leave them alone. That can be done. Young master only needs you. The others are dispensable. I'll come pick you up later tonight, little one. Enjoy your last day of freedom." Monet giggled as she walked deeper into the alley, and Piska disappeared back into the ground. Divided by. The next morning, Ace walked into the galley and looked around, looking confused. "What's wrong, Yoi?" Marco asked as he entered behind him. "Morning, Pops. Have you seen Luffy?" "He was already out of bed by the time we woke up. Thought maybe he was hungry and came to get breakfast before us," Ace asked as he continued his search. "No, haven't seen him," Marco mused with a hand to his chin. "That's very strange, Yoi. He's never up before you three. As a matter of fact, it's hard to get him up at all, Yoi." Ace, Sabo's head popped up from the floorboard of the galley, causing everyone to turn to him. "Luffy's hat is still down here. Not only that," Law popped his head from the same hole, "our boat is missing. He even took off our flag." He held up the black flag. "What?" Ace screamed. "Are you sure? I just looked, dumbass. It's not there. We better tell Pops, Yoi." Marco turned to leave the galley. The three teens followed. Whitebeard looked pensive as they reported to him. "Something isn't right," he said. "Something must have happened. Who was in charge of watch last night?" "Rakuyo." "I'll go get him, Yoi," Marco said and returned not too long after. "I've already asked all my men who were on watch with me, Pops," Rakuyo said. "No one saw anyone leaving or coming near the ship all night. I had men in all three crow's nest, and men stationed in every corner of the ship. There was no blind spot. There's no way little Luffy could have left without someone noticing." "But he's not on the ship," Law said. "We've looked everywhere and asked everyone. No one's seen him since last night." "Maybe he left before we departed from the island last night," Rakuyo suggested. "No," Sabo interjected. "He went to bed with us last night, and that was well after we left the island. Before that, we were eating some snacks. All four of us were together when the ship departed," Ace said. "Wait," Law said thoughtfully. "There was a few minutes where Luya went off on his own yesterday. Remember, it was when we were in the bookstore. But he said he saw snacks he wanted," Sabo said. "He even came back with 2 bags full of them, and he wasn't gone that long." "Was he acting strange when he came back, Yoi?" Marco asked. "No," Ace answered. "It's Luffy we're talking about," Marco said, running a hand through his hair in worry. "He must have snuck out when the watch shift changed, Yoi." "The newspaper," Whitebeard said slowly in thought. "It could be Doflamingo. He must have predicted where we would land next after Fishman Island and sent his men there. They must have threatened him to go with them. I know most of Jokerya's men. And I know for a fact that Luya could have beaten most of them up if he wanted to," Law said, "or at least make enough noise that we'd notice." "That may be. But what if they struck him where it hurts the most?" Whitebeard said sadly. "Think about it. What could possibly cause the boy to follow them willingly?" Law, Ace, and Sabo slowly came to the realization of what must have happened. "That's right, Yoi," Marco said. "They must have threatened you three somehow, without you boys realizing." "Damn it," Ace cursed. "We have to get Luffy back." "Dressrosa," Law said. "Jokerya is in Dressrosa, been there for years. We know where he is, and I know the fighting styles of all his family members and the top 3 executives. We know where he's been," Juro said. At some point, by word of mouth, everyone had gathered around on deck in worry, while the commanders stood around Whitebeard's chair on the upper deck. "That's why we've avoided Dressrosa the whole time you boys have been with us." Jazu nodded. "We can't act too rashly. He practically has the citizens of Dressrosa as hostages. That's why the government can't do anything about it, not to mention his position as a warlord." "Don't worry, my sons," Whitebeard said. "We will make plans, and we'll teach the world why you don't mess with us. We will get our youngest back." Everyone cheered at that with their weapons drawn and up in the air, a declaration of war against the one that has wronged them. "I know this isn't the best time for this," Whitebeard looked to Ace and Sabo, "but with the situation as it is, we need to be at our best. Ace, Sabo, I want you both to be commanders of the 2nd Division." "Us?" they both said. "Why us? There are plenty of people that have been here longer." "It is precisely because it is you two," the captain smiled at them. "Marco has been taking care of both his own division and the 2nd Division. We both decided that this position would be perfect for you and started teaching you the ropes in hopes you would be ready to take over in a few years. Why else would he let you take care of some of his duties? With things as it is now, I believe now is a good time for you to take the reins. What about Trow? Sabo asked. He's older than us, and he's smarter. I can't, Law said with a smirk, because I plan on leaving the same day Luffy leaves. Not to fight him for the seat as the Pirate King, but because I want to have my own adventures with my own crew. Also, to support him when I can. I also think you two would be perfect for the position. The whole second division below them roared their own approval, having known about it since Marco asked them their opinion about it a couple years back. That was why they've been spending as much time as they could individually with the two boys, so that they would understand each of their strengths and weaknesses. So what do you say, Yoi? Marco asked. If that's what it takes to get our son back, then we accept, they both grinned. Divided by. After Monet picked him up from the boat he'd stolen, she flew him towards Dressrosa. Now, he was standing before the man who he'd never forget, no matter how young he was when they first met. There was no way to forget that hideous pink feathered coat. I'm so glad to have you back, Doflamingo cooed. It's been so boring without you to entertain me. You are, after all, my prized possession. I heard about how Glem treated you boys horribly. Aren't you glad that he's been disposed of? The warlord continued on, not waiting for an answer. Don't you worry. I won't let anything like that happen to you again. You will be staying here in my country, where I will be taking good care of you. You will always have a comfortable bed, fed to your content, and be trained to be my right-hand man. Doflamingo laughed. Now then, why don't we have Violet show you to your living quarter? You remember her, right? Of course you do. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to call for her. She will be your caretaker from now on. Luffy didn't even get a chance to say anything. He didn't feel like saying anything. He could feel the sadness all around the seemingly happy island. He felt like his heart was being crushed. It took everything he had to not shed a tear at the sadness that tried to seep into him. Who knows how Mingo would react to that? Instead of a room in the castle, like he had first thought, he was led down under the large building and into the prison area. In each of the cells were many sleeping large muscular men, all bandaged and looking worse for wear. They stopped at an empty cell at the end of the corridor. Like promised, there was a large comfortable bed that was out of place in the cold dungeon. This is your room. Make yourself comfortable. Breakfast will be served in a few hours. I suggest you sleep until then. She then closed the bars behind him and locked it before leaving him alone. Luffy looked out the small barred window to see it was still dark out and crawled into his bed, trying to make himself comfortable. But he couldn't sleep. His brothers weren't there with him. The thought of being alone made him cry. At least here the feeling of sadness wasn't as strong. It was more tolerable. He was startled by the jangle of keys and the creaking of bars. He hadn't noticed it was already morning, with all the tossing turning he did under the plush cover. Your breakfast. Violet greeted him with a large plate of fancy omelet and a large cup each of orange juice and milk. Eat up. Training will start in 2 days. You can rest until then and get used to your living situation. There were shouts from all the other prisoners next to him, demanding where the kid came from and why he gets real food while they only get a plate of mush. The glare she sent them had them shut their mouths and turn their glare at him. Luffy sent his plate a forlorn look before slowly eating. It didn't taste as good as Thatch's, but he was hungry. Thatch had taught him to never waste food, so he ate everything he was given, even if it didn't fill him. He ignored all strange looks sent his way. He didn't even bother looking at them and kept to himself. What was the point? There was no need to talk to them. The only ones he wanted to talk to right now weren't with him. He looked to the window and hoped Doflamingo kept his promise and his family were safe. Violet returned with clothes for him to change into and once again left him, only to come back with his extravagant lunch and dinner. How was he supposed to get used to his surroundings if they don't let him out and walk around and explore? At least there was a clean toilet he can use in his cell. He can't even stick his head out the bars to look down the hall. The cell bars were made of sea stone to ensure he wouldn't be able to escape. Is this all he's allowed to see? If it is, then he's already used to it. There's nothing to do. It's boring. The least they can do is give him a good book to read or a game or something. He decided to ask Violet for something the next time she returned the next morning. He hates being bored. A book? Violet asked in surprise the next morning when she brought him his breakfast. Yeah, I'm bored. She laughed. Young master would be thrilled to know that you've taken to reading. I'll bring you something from the library. Next time, you don't have to wait for me to come to you. Just say what you want, and I'll come. Violet brought a few books for him to keep him occupied. Satisfied, he settled down on his plush bed to read, ignoring all the questions from the other prisoners. He laid in his bed, trying to sleep. After a few hours, he gave up and lit the lamp on the small table next to him and read through the night. No matter how nice and warm the blankets were, it was too cold for him to sleep, having gotten used to always sleeping with someone next to him. It was usually Ace and Sabo and sometimes Trow or Pops. Divided by. The next night, after all the other prisoners had fallen asleep, Luffy tossed and turned. Giving up, he got up and walked along the cell perimeter. One wall made of bricks that would make a lot of noise if he broke it. The other wall that led to the outside was made of strong rocks that he was sure he could break but would also make a lot of noise. The bars that lead to the hall with the door was made of sea stone. And the last one, the one that separated him from the other cell with the prisoners, were just regular iron bars. Luffy thought about it a bit before shrugging and pulled two of the bars on the bottom apart wide enough for him to slip through. He's too tired to go another night without sleep. Once he was in the other cell, he didn't bother to look around and snuggled with the closest person. He was so used to sleeping with his brothers and thought maybe he couldn't sleep because he was alone. The problem was this guy smelled like he needed a bath, not like Ace and Sabo, who always smelled clean. He just sighed and tried to make himself comfortable and finally fell asleep, too tired to care about the smell. The next morning the prisoners woke up to find Luffy sleeping in their cell. The man Luffy went to sleep with cradled the boy, not wanting to wake him yet since the kid looked so comfortable, and they all saw how tired he looked yesterday. They were all worried about having someone so young in the prison with them. They tried to get the boy to talk, but he would just ignore them. "What are you doing with the boy?" They all looked up to see Violet glaring at them, with a plate of breakfast in one hand. At the sound of her voice, Luffy stirred. "Food," he mumbled as he rubbed his eyes. His nose picked up the smell of eggs. Still not fully awake but hungry enough to want food, he reached out towards where the smell was coming from. They all stared with wide eyes as the arm stretched over 2 feet longer than it should be able to reach, only for it to snap back when it touched the bar separating them from Violet. Now wide awake from his arms snapping back, Luffy sat up and took in his surrounding. "What are you doing there, Luffy?" Luffy turned to look at Violet and pouted. "I don't like sleeping alone." He got up and apologized to the guy he snuggled with before crawling back through the iron bars he bent and back to his cell. Violet entered his cell and set his plate of breakfast on the small table for the boy. "Why didn't you tell us you ate a devil's fruit? I thought you knew. That's why there's sea stone in here." He pointed to the bars leading to the prison hall. "All the cells have sea stone," she explained. "Anyway, eat your breakfast. I'll be back in an hour for your training." An hour later she brought him to an armory filled with different kinds of armors and weapons. "Young master wants you to disguise yourself. You've already made a name for yourself, and we don't need mass panic once the citizens find out that one of the demon children is here on this island," Violet explained. "And young master wants the people to get to know you before he announces you as his right hand. So a disguise and an alias." "Aliens?" Luffy tilted his head to the side. "Alias. It's a fake name so the people doesn't know it's you." "Oh," he sang before scrunching his face in thought. "Lucy," he said. Something short and simple, and yet similar to his own name so that his brothers would know it was him. "All right, Lucy it is. Now you need a disguise." Luffy immediately picked up a gold helmet and put it on, smiling widely. "I've always wanted to wear one of these," he laughed. "Oh, and this is so cool." He picked up a white beard and mustache that just happened to be here. "It's like playing dress up," he cheered, feeling a lot better about his situation after a night of sleep. Violet smiled at the boy fondly before leading him out to a coliseum-like arena for his training. He walked out on the round stage surrounded by water. There was a crowd of spectators to watch. He could feel it again, the sadness he felt when he first set foot on the island kingdom, but it wasn't as strong. He did his best to suppress his haki and the urge to cry. There was no need to make Mingo mad at him for something he can barely control. He gritted his teeth in an attempt to control himself, thinking to himself that this would be good training to control his emotion. The announcer announced the fighter's name, and Luffy knew what kind of training he was doing. He's fighting, not training. Joker just wants to see what he had learned after being away from his watchful eyes for so long. His first opponent appeared with a sword. It was the prisoner that kept him warm while he slept. Luffy wasn't too keen on beating the guy up after helping sleep, but he didn't have a choice. He looked up and saw Mingo watching him. Violet didn't give him a weapon, so he supposed this training required him to fight a swordsman barehanded. It didn't take very long at all. All it took was a few dodge and a single punch to the man's face, and the show was over. He did his best as to not hurt the man too much. The man was dragged off the stage and another took his place. This went on for a few hours before he was led back to his room, tired and exhausted from fighting that many alone. They weren't strong, but fighting for that long tired him out. At least he won each match. Doflamingo wouldn't be able to get mad at him if he won. "You know, kid," the first man he knocked out said, "you're more than welcome to sleep here with us. We have no idea why Doflamingo would keep a kid like you here with us, but if it helps you sleep, you're more than welcome to." The other prisoners nodded their agreement. "But I beat you guys up today," Luffy said softly, feeling guilty. "You didn't have a choice, did you?" Luffy shook his head. "Then no hard feelings. You're really strong for a kid." Luffy lit up at the compliment, and they all chatted merrily, with Luffy telling them stories of his trainings and adventures with his brothers and the rest of his family. A month passed, each day the same as the next. Breakfast, lunch, training, dinner, bed. If he wasn't tired yet, he would read the books Violet brought to him. They weren't as interesting as the ones Sabo would give him, but at least it gave him something to do. Some of Doflamingo's family would train with him, since the other gladiators weren't strong enough for him. He's even had to fight Violet a few times. The family members were tough, but he had a feeling they went easy on him. Since they were going easy on him, he did the same, not showing them everything he knew. Grandpops and the family had taught him to never show all his cards to enemies, to keep it for when it's really needed as a surprise. There was no need for Doflamingo to know everything about him. He would get one day a week to rest. On those days, Violet would spend time with him, and one day she taught him to play chess. He remembered how each piece moved quick, Violet said as he took her pawn. Young master would be proud to know this, though you need to learn where to move the pieces better. He ignored the remark. It seems young master is proud of anything he does. Luffy's just glad to have something to pass the time. At least the other prisoners were fun to talk to. They ignore him when Violet comes, though. The only good thing is that no one has treated him badly. Everything he asked for, he was given, though it felt weird to ask for it when the person wasn't there. The first time he did it, he was thirsty and said so out loud. Not too long after, Violet showed up with a glass of water for him. If he wanted a snack, if he wanted second helping of food, Violet would always show up soon after with something for him. Divided by. If you're not going to eat that, mind sharing? One of the men in the cell next to us asked one evening. Luffy looked down at his plate of uneaten food and shook his head. Trust me, you wouldn't want this, he said as they stabbed at his plate. He hasn't been eating as much as he used to when he started tasting something strange in his food a week ago. The reason for not asking for seconds lately. What did you say, you brat? Don't you know that you get treated better than anyone else here? Stop wasting food and share some, the man reprimanded. That reminds me, we've never asked, but who are you anyway? You're in a prison and yet get treated so much better than the rest of us. I'm just a tool, nobody important. And really, you don't want this. Luffy tore a piece of his bread and tossed it towards a mouse in the corner of his cell. They all watched in horror as the mouse died not long after eating the offered food. Don't worry, my brother would like you. He doesn't like wasting food either. He gave the man a smile. The man was suddenly taken aback by the smile that didn't belong when faced with poisoned food. How can you keep eating if you knew? Because I was taught to not waste food. Luffy answered as if that was the most obvious answer. I'm getting used to it. Besides, Mingo doesn't want to kill me. If he did, he would have done so already instead of bringing me here. The prisoners looked at the boy sadly. After getting to know Luffy, he's been their bright light in the dreary cells. Even after being thoroughly beaten by the boy at least once each, they felt the need to protect him. But what can they do? They're just as stuck as he is in their prison. Divided by. The next day, she brought him some fancy clothes that Doflamingo wants him to wear out. Can you help me? I don't know how to put these on. My brothers always dress me. He held the pile of clothes out to her. He took off his shirt and waited for her. You can't dress yourself. Well, that explains why your shirt buttons always look off. The slip-over shirts you give are so much easier to wear, he proudly. You've worn some of those t-shirts backward. I did. Why didn't you say so? He pouted, to which she giggled. It's noisy outside, Luffy commented as she helped him dress. You can hear it from here, she asked curiously. She, herself, couldn't hear the commotion from where they were. Young master wishes for you to take care of some troublemakers, hence the clothes. He wants you to make a good impression on the citizens, since you'll be representing him. What did they do? What they did is not of importance, she said. What is important is that the young master wants you to get rid of them for him. After putting on his helmet and beard, she led him out of the cell. Once Violet opened the door leading to the outside, Luffy cringed at the sounds of crying voices. It was much louder out here. The sounds left a heavy feeling in his heart, and he struggled just to move his feet forward. Walking through the town, he noticed something he didn't when he first came. There were toys walking and talking on their own. No one else seemed to think anything strange of it, so he didn't think to ask about them. They looked just as happy as the people living there, but he could hear them even if they didn't say it out loud. I'm human. It's me. Don't you remember me? Doflamingo did this to us. I'm not a toy. I'm not a toy. I'm not a toy. I'm not a toy. Help me, Violet. Luffy's somber tone caught her attention. She turned to look at him and stopped in her tracks, lowering her hand in an attempt to wipe away the slow, steady stream of tears. What's wrong? Are you okay? She asked in concern. She could feel an oppressive aura seeping around them, thinking it might be the cause of the boy's problem, though she wasn't sure where it was coming from. Does it matter how I take care of them? His voice cracked as he asked. Young master just says for you to get rid of them. Is there a problem? If you can't do it, I can talk to young master for you, she offered kindly, giving up on stopping his tears. Okay. He calmly moved towards where he could feel the disturbance, with Violet following behind this time. The sooner I can go back to my room, the better I'll feel. Once they reached the area near the ocean but not close enough for him to see the sea, he found the disturbance Doflamingo wanted him to take care of. There was a small group of pirates scaring the citizens of Dressrosa, demanding for Doflamingo. There were only 7 of them, and the people of the town were all hiding in the surrounding buildings. There were hushed whispering once the townspeople noticed him. They all recognized him from the Colosseum. The hushed sounds finally caught the attention of the pirates, who were busy overturning stalls, sending fishes, fruits, vegetables, and other sellable wares all over the ground. "What's this?" A large, bulky man glared down at Luffy. "Don't you know we're pirates? Get lost, old man. We have no business with you. We want Doflamingo's head." "Captain," another man jeered. "They're saying this old man is the champion here, even beating a few of the families. Is that so?" The first man, the captain, smirked. "This shrimpy old man. Really, he's already in tears in our presence. The Donksicote family is nothing but a bunch of wusses to be beaten by this scrawny shrimp." They all laughed. "Please leave," Luffy said quietly, clutching the hem of his shirt. "What was that, runt?" the captain hissed. "Please leave," Luffy said louder, looking at the man in the eyes to show he was serious, though the tears still streaming down his eyes didn't help with the look. "Mingo doesn't want you here, so leave." They all laughed at him. "Did you hear that, men?" The captain laughed. "Mingo doesn't want us here. What are you going to do about it, huh?" Luffy took a glance around at the hidden townspeople. There weren't that many people since it was still early in the morning, but they were still innocent bystanders. "I'm talking to you," the captain yelled at the boy when the man noticed he wasn't being taken seriously and punched the boy in front of him. Luffy fell to the ground. He'd gotten distracted by one of the stuffed toy elephant, trying to protect a little boy, and the surprise punch caught him off guard that he lost his grip over his haki, causing it to break free of his control. There were several thuds around him, and he looked around to see all of the civilians falling to the ground, along with the pirates. He scrambled to gain control over his haki. Violet walked over to the shaking boy, hunched over himself, stunned at what had happened. "Luffy, what did you do?" "Haki," he mumbled with his face pressed into his knees and arms around his legs. "Lost control." She knelt down and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "What happened to cause you to lose control?" "It's hard to control here." To many voices. "The toys, they're crying. I don't know what to do. I can't help them." He lifted his head to show his tired eyes, tears no longer coming. "It's quiet now, but I can still hear the others." "You can hear the toys crying?" she asked slowly as to understand what he said. "Not crying, screaming. They're not toys. They want to be remembered," he said tiredly. "It hurts them to know how happy their people are, not knowing, remembering the person that's right there next to them." "I can hear your sufferings too," he said the last part so softly that she almost missed it. She gave him a sad smile. "What you hear is the person's heart." She got up and patted her dress free of dirt. "Now, why don't I tie these guys up while you get yourself together? Then we'll go back to your room." He nodded and let her do as she said. The silence between them during the walk back was strained. Luffy, tired from having to keep his haki in check, and Violet, thinking to herself about the boy's revelation. How much of Luffy's confession should she tell Doflamingo? She knows that her young master enjoys knowing how much the boy grows as a fighter, so any form of strength is welcome. But would it put the boy in more danger? There has to be a reason why Luffy hasn't said anything about being able to hear those voices and why he's been keeping his haki hidden. She shook her head. There was no way for her to keep his conqueror's haki hidden, with how he took down the pirates and the other people around them. The boy's haki is strong for it to be leaking out just after taking a step outside, now that she's realized what that oppressing aura was that she felt earlier. When he returned to the dungeon, no one said anything to the boy. They could tell from his expression that he didn't want anything to do with anyone. They were relieved when he returned back to his normal smiling self the next morning. Divided by. "Young master is very pleased with your work yesterday," Violet announced the next day. "He's allowing you to go out as you please, on the condition you wear this." She showed him an anklet, one very similar to what he wore before. "Don't want to go out," Luffy pouted to her as she placed the tiny bomb on his left leg. "How about I show you a place that's far from people?" she offered. "It's a beautiful place full of sunflowers." He hesitated before agreeing, wanting to get some fresh air and maybe see more of the island. "Can we avoid people? I'll show you a route you can use." "There are people and toys but not many," she assured him. He sighed in relief once they reached the top of Flower Hill. From here they were far enough away from civilization that the voices were just below a murmur in the background of his mind. "It's pretty here," he said before falling back first into the ground in the middle of the sunflower field. "I like it here." "Thank you. I'm glad you like it. You can come here anytime you want to get away from the voices if it ever becomes too much." She knelt down to take a seat next to him, the tall foliage covering them from anyone viewing from above. They continue on like that in peaceful silence until Luffy shot a hand out and grabbed something that jumped over him. He stared at what he caught, thinking it to be a bug of a sort, only to widen his eyes in surprise. "It's a tiny person." Tontata. Violet covered her mouth in surprise. "Ton what?" "Viola." the Tontata exclaimed before biting Luffy's hand to free itself and jumped onto Violet's chest in a hug. Leo, what are you doing so far from Green Bit? Violet asked. Luffy sat up to watch the tiny thing in interest. Looking for Princess Mancherry, Leo said desperately. Have you seen her? I'm sorry, she said sadly. I haven't heard anything about her. I've been assigned to take care of this boy. She gestured to Luffy, who was sitting cross-legged with his hands over his ankles, flapping his knees. Hey, is this Manchi princess a small person like you? Luffy asked. Princess Mancherry, Leo corrected before nodding. Kinda hard since I've never met her, but I sense some tiny people in town. They're worried. I'm guessing they're like you, looking for her too. You can sense that far away. Violet's eyes widen in surprise. Really, the more she learns what he can do, the more he surprises her. Yeah, he nodded. The whole island. I can tell who is who if I've met the person before, but I'm far enough away that I can't hear them as loud. He gave her a sheepish smile. That reminds me, I'm hungry. Violet looked up the sky for a moment. It is past lunchtime. Why don't we go back? I'll get you something to eat. I'll keep an eye for Princess Mancherry in the meantime. All right, Leo. Divided by. Since he was given permission to go out as he pleased, Violet stopped locking his cell door. He gave a slight push on the door and shivered at the effect of the sea stone. The door opened easily at the slight touch. He walked out and kicked the door close, intent on exploring the castle above. It's been a week since his first visit to Flower Hill. He debated on whether he want to go back today, but decided on exploring the building instead. Maybe he can find this man person. He skipped along the halls, peering through each room, not finding anything that caught his interest. What are you doing? Luffy turned in mid-skip to see Buffalo talking to him. Exploring. Today's my free day, he explained. He turned back around to continue on, before he stopped and turned back around. By the way, where's the toilet? I gotta pee. Go straight down that way. Turn right at the second hall. It's the fourth door on the left. Buffalo was taken aback by the boy's carefree attitude. Okay, thanks. Luffy followed the direction he thought he remembered, only to find himself lost. He randomly opened doors in hopes of relieving himself. During his search, he found Doflamingo in what looked like the library, reading a book. The man looked up and was surprised to see who disturbed him. Hi, Mingo. Where's the toilet? Gotta pee. Buffalo gave me wrong directions, and I gotta go now. He whined as he started to dance in place. He frowned at the laugh he got in answer. I'm not joking. I have to pee. You know what? Forget it. I'll go right here. Luffy made to take off his pants. Wait, please don't. Doflamingo frowned in distaste. Why don't I take you there? Really? Yeah. The boy ran in a circle with his arms in the air as he cheered. Hurry. When Luffy finally emerged from the bathroom, he found Doflamingo leaning against the wall, waiting for him. Thanks. I feel better. I'm gonna continue exploring now. I'm on a new adventure. Doflamingo placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, stopping him in his track. Come join me in the library. I hear you enjoy reading. He thought about it for a moment before happily agreeing and followed the man back to the library. As Luffy read, the Shichibukai studied the boy before him, amused and slightly confused as to why the boy would readily agree to spend time with him. Does the boy not understand that he's technically a prisoner there? You seem awfully comfortable, Doflamingo found himself saying, startling the boy who was reading and kicking his legs back and forth. I hear you've made friends with the prisoners. Are you not afraid? Don't you want to run from here? He asked, voice taunting. Luffy tilted his head in thought before shaking his head. I was told, if the world gives you a bird, you turn it into dinner or something like that. Besides, I can't run. It won't let me. He pointed to the bomb anklet. Really, the overly large smile sent his way made Doflamingo frown in confusion. You are a strange one. I hear that lots. I wonder why. You have a screw loose, the man before him deadpanned. Luffy only shrugged and continued reading. Leaving already? Doflamingo asked a few hours later when the boy hopped of his chair. Dinner time was all Luffy cheered before leaving with his book, only to come back a few seconds later, looking sheepish. I don't know how to get back. The man sighed as he closed his book and got up. I'll take you back. Once they arrived to Luffy's cell, they both stared at the door, ignoring the glares and yells from the prisoners to their tormentor. I guess I should have left it open. Luffy tilted his head as he tried to think of a way to open the door. The only thing Doflamingo did was to face palm. How could he forget that he placed sea stone bars in the prison? How does Violet open the door? I don't know. Normally, there was a light laugh from behind them. There's a small space on the bar where it's not coated in sea stone. I'll tie a towel there for you to use next time. She moved to open it to show them and handed Luffy his dinner as he entered with a thanks to the both of them. You're awfully friendly with Doflamingo, one of the prisoners said suspiciously. He said I can come and go as I want, so I am. And I was told that I'm a great source of headaches, so I'm trying to prove my family right. Luffy laughed along with the others. Divided by. The next week, Doflamingo settled himself in his study, speaking to someone on the other end of his den mushy, when there was a knock on his door. Without waiting for him to answer, the door slammed open with a loud, excited yell. Mingo, is everything all right, young master? The man on the other end of the call asked at the same time Doflamingo slammed his hands on his desk to yell, "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry, young master," Gladius said, fear lacing his voice. "I found the brat raiding the kitchen for snacks while looking for you." The angry man turned his glare to the boy, who had his arm full of various fruits, make himself at home on the couch with a happy smile. The man sighed and waved the masked man away. "Is that all you have to report, Virgo?" he asked once the door closed. "Yes, sir," the man replied before Doflamingo hung up on the call. He got up from his chair to stalk towards the boy and towered over him. "Next time, wait for me to answer before barging in. I was on an important call," he growled. "Sorry," Luffy laughed, not looking the least bit sorry. "This castle is huge. Got lost looking for you. Then I found the kitchen and thought you want snacks." He held out an apple that he'd taken a bite out of to the warlord. The man sighed in defeat and slumped himself into the couch across from the boy and picked up a banana. "Why would you be looking for me?" "Just because," the boy shrugged. "That's not an answer." Because there's nothing else to do. So I wanted to play with Mingo." "Go play with someone else. I'm sure one of the officers have time to spare for you." "I'm busy." "Oh, fine." Luffy finished up the rest of his snacks in one gulp, not leaving anything for Doflamingo, before getting up and leaving the room to once again roam around the castle. An hour later, Doflamingo was once again disturbed by a loud noise outside his study. Stomping towards the door, he slammed it open to peer out and give the person a glare. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded of the stonehead that appeared on the wall. "Hide and seek with Luffy," Pisca squeaked. "And why are you using your ability inside the castle? You're making too much noise. You're disturbing me. It's faster this way." The stone user squeaked before a loud boom came from the floor below them. "What now?" Doflamingo threw his arms up in frustration, then proceeded to the stairs going down. Turning a corner, he found Baby 5 with her arm in the shape of a large pistol pointing at Luffy, who was rubbing his head in pain. "Look, young master," the woman gushed upon seeing him, "I found Luffy. That means I won." "Out!" Doflamingo roared. "Stop making a mess inside the castle. You're giving me a headache. Play outside." He stormed his way back to his study. Week after week, Luffy spent his free days playing with each of the officers, getting to know them better. 2 months later, he found himself wandering the halls and not finding anyone to play with. He opened a random door to find himself in the library again. Doflamingo looked up from reading some files to see Luffy walking towards a shelf and picked out a book and sitting across from him to read. "You're being awfully quiet today. Can't find anybody to play with, and you don't like it when I bother you." "So I'm reading," Luffy shrugged. Doflamingo studied the boy for a moment before putting his paper down and setting his files away. "I hear you go to Flower Hill every day after breakfast." Luffy looked up from his book and gave the man a smile. "It's quiet there. I like it. Why don't you spend more time there? Like right now, instead of being cooped up in the castle." "Wanted to spend more time with you guys and get to know my new family." "New family? That's what you guys are, right?" Luffy tilted his head. He was pretty sure that's what they called themselves. Doflamingo smirked. "That's right. We're your new family. Say, have you met any of the Tontata tribe?" "Taunton? You mean the tiny people with tails?" The man nodded. "Yeah, they're so cool. I caught one flying over me. He said he was looking for some man princess. I don't really get it. I don't really see many when I go in the mornings though. They must like to sleep in." The man looked thoughtful for a moment before asking what else he talked to Tontatas about. "Nothing much. When I do see them, they run away," Luffy pouted. "It's not fair. I wanted to talk to them more. They're so cool." "Come in," Doflamingo said when someone knocked on the door, and Treble entered. Luffy made a face at the man and scooted away from the gooey man as he walked around his seat to Doflamingo's side. "Here's the latest test result from Caesar." The goopy man handed over a file. "Good. Leave us." The Shichibukai waved the man away with an amused glaze to Luffy. "Don't like Treble?" he asked once the mentioned man left. "No," Luffy crossed an arm and huffed. "He's slimy and gross." The boy made a face and stuck his tongue at the door. Doflamingo chuckled as he studied the file that was handed to him. "If you could have anything in the world, what would you want?" The man interrupted the boy's reading once more. Luffy gave him an excited look. "I want to be the Pirate King." "Really?" the man said thoughtfully. "That may be a little hard." Luffy shrugged. "Why?" Doflamingo leaned back into the couch. "There's going to be a huge competition in a couple of months. There will be contenders from all over the world, all strong. Pirates, warriors, you name it, they'll be there. The winner of the competition will get anything they wish for. You will be entering to make sure no one outside the family wins. You're rigging the competition." The man grinned at the lack of accusation on the boy's face. There was just pure curiosity. "That's right." "Oh, okay. It was as simple as that." Try to think of another wish, something that I can easily grant. This will also be a good chance for you to fight others that are strong and gain their abilities. He looked down to the file on the table before coming to a decision, while Luffy went back to reading. Also, I'm going to have Caesar work on you to make you stronger. Okay, came the distracted reply. That's it. You're not going to protest? Doflamingo asked with an amused smile. Why? Do you want me to? You're going to do what you want anyway. Luffy gave him a confused look. Normally, one doesn't want to be experimented on. Well, it is my body. I kinda like it, but I trust you not to kill me. You want me alive anyway. The boy brushed it off and went back to reading, causing Doflamingo to laugh at the boy's trust in him. Divided by. A week after the experiment started, the men in the prison started to notice a change in Luffy. Sure, he was still smiling and talking to them like usual, but the smiles were more strained. Then a few days later, a lot of them were supporting deep bruising and wore a lot more bandages than before. He wouldn't answer their questions of what happened, only brushing them off and changing the topic. Luffy had gotten more violent during their matches in the Colosseum. As the days and weeks passed, the boy had gotten more distant with them, no longer talking or sleeping with them, just huddling in the corner of his cell, shivering. Sometimes he would hold his head as if it was in pain. There were days when the boy would go out of control in his own cell and almost attacked Violet but backed down just moments before, looking like he was having a hard time controlling himself. On one of Luffy's free day, Doflamingo carried the boy back to his room, with Violet following behind him, both looking grim. The boy looked so out of it that the prisoners demanded to know what the deranged man did to their sunshine. The man just ignored them and placed Luffy on his bed. Violet was actually surprised that Doflamingo actually offered to take the boy back to his cell and had been careful with his handling of the boy. She was even more surprised at the concerned look on the man's face after placing the boy on the bed. Sure, the boy's reaction to the latest drug Caesar injected into the boy is a cause for concern. But to see Doflamingo, of all people, to show worry is strange. An hour after the injection, Luffy had collapsed. He wasn't unconscious, but he couldn't carry himself on his own two legs and started to babble about everything and anything. Nothing he said had made sense, so Doflamingo decided the boy should go back to his cell, since it didn't sound like the boy would be saying anything important. Even after being laid down, the boy didn't stop his babbling. This wasn't supposed to happen, Doflamingo murmured to himself as Violet closed the door behind them to leave the boy to himself. I should ask Caesar about this. Just as they were about to go up the stairs, there was a loud, inhumane scream followed by a sound of something being broken. The two of them ran back to Luffy's cell to find his bed had been thrown into the bars between him and the other prisoners, now broken in half. The boy was huddled with his back into the corner with his head in his hands, crying. Help me, he wailed. Someone help me. The monsters are coming to get me. Please help. Ace, Sabo, Trow, anybody, please. His trailed off as he sobbed, his shoulders shaking in fear. Hallucination, Doflamingo said as he watched the boy with a frown. What should we do, young master? Violet asked. Doflamingo wordlessly opened the door and shrugged off his feathered cape and draped it over the delusional boy and held him close. The boy started to struggle in his arms, trying to get away from the monster he kept screaming about. Unsure of what to do, the man placed a hand on Luffy's head in what he thought would comfort the boy. Luffy, it's okay. You're safe now, he said quietly. Luffy stopped struggling to turn his head to Doflamingo's, his eyes wide in fear. Mingo, that's right. I'm here to save you from the monsters. Why don't you spend the night with me so the monster can't get you? I'll be sure to scare them away. Luffy sniffled and nodded, fear still in his eyes. Violet, get this place cleaned up by tomorrow and replace the bed, he said to the woman before heading out of the dungeon. Right, she stuttered, surprised at the gentleness he was showing. Divided by. The next morning Doflamingo found himself panicking when he didn't see Luffy where he should be. Why he was panicking, he wasn't even sure. Why should he care where the boy went? Hell, why did he even let the brat sleep with him? The brat should have taken care of his own meltdown for all he cared. The brat was just one of his tools. His tool that he needs in one piece and not broken. He groaned into his hand, got up, dressed, and started his search for the boy, which didn't take very long. As soon as he opened his bedroom door, he found Luffy sitting with his back against the wall across from his door with a thoughtful look, complete with his finger and thumb on his chin. What are you doing? The man sighed. Trying to remember how I got to your room, was the answer he got. Doflamingo ran a hand through his hair and sighed once more. It's fine if you don't remember. Let's just go get breakfast. And then I need a word with Caesar. He growled the last part. I say we let Shanks know, Sabo suggested, right after finding out that Luffy wasn't on the ship. They held a meeting with only Whitebeard, commanders, and Law present. Why? I'm pretty sure this entire ship can take them out. Law crossed his arms. Because, imagine what would happen if Shanks finds out. And what if he's closer to Dressrosa than us? Ace growled. I don't see the problem with that. If it gets Luya saved quicker, then what's the problem? Law argued back. Because we want to be the ones to save Luffy. Both Ace and Sabo whined at him. Actually, Marco interjected, it'd be a huge problem if Akagami saves Luffy. Luffy is already known to the government to be one of us and part of a SL. A wanted kid with connections to 2 emperors would cause a stir. Add in a marine hero. And the revolutionaries' leader, we would have the world government up in arms. Yoi. The 5 elders would want his head. And Sengoku wouldn't be able to do a thing about it. That means we have to let Garp and Dragon know too, just in case. At least tell them to keep their hands out of Dressrosa. Now the problem would be, how do we contact Dragon? Haruta said. Luffy left his hat. Ace held up the straw hat for everyone to see. What does that hat have to do with contacting Dragon? Thatch asked. Lou likes to keep his treasures in one place, so he doesn't forget where he puts them, Sabo answered as he put his fingers behind the red ribbon and pulled out a hair clip. He has a full sheet of Viva card that his dad sent him. And he pulled out another hair clip. And another. And another. He glared at Law, who smirked back in return, giving up when all he kept picking up were more hair clips. Sabo turned the hat upside down and started shaking it violently, all the while keeping his glare on Law. Thatch gave a low whistle. How does he keep all that in there? He asked, looking at the small collection of hair pieces and other small shiny pebbles that must have came from stolen treasures. Ace shrugged and picked up the large white sheet that already has a piece torn off. It's Luffy. Who knows? He says it's a mystery. Here, he waved the paper around for everyone to see. Ace, Sabo, Whitebeard said, gaining everyone's attention. I want you and your division to find Dragon and let him know the situation. We'll have you use a nondescript ship as to not alert the Marine. Law will stay to help us update Garp and Shanks. It'd be faster if we take Striker 1 and 2, Sabo said. But it's also eye-catching. Yoi. We don't want to alert the Marines, or anyone else for that matter, about our connection to the Revolutionary Army. At least this way, you'd have some bonding time with your division and have someone fish you out if you happen on a storm. Yoi, Marco explained. You tell your division whatever you want regarding Dragon, but don't forget that Luffy handpicked quite a few of your members. Yoi. We'll tell them the truth, but we'll also tell them not to tell anyone else, Sabo said. Yeah, Ace ran a hand through his hair, looking down. Luffy trusts them, so will we. Divided by. During the first day of sailing, Ace and Sabo explained to their men why they were going to see the leader of the Revolutionary Army. They were all surprised, of course, but not one of them backed down from anything to save their Luffy. Most of them were there when the 3 of them were saved and knew the boys. They didn't care, because they knew that Luffy rarely had any contact with his dad. To them, it doesn't matter who the kid's parents were, he's part of their family. The rest of them were ones that Luffy saved from living on the streets and getting killed, giving them a new home on Moby Dick. They owed Luffy their life and were more than happy to save their little ball of sunshine. It took them a little over a month to get to the island the Viva card pointed them to. That is, unless it's pointing to an island that's directly in line with this one. If it was, then Sabo's going to have to keep Ace from blowing this island up. They were wasting time, and it's already been over a month. They had to go back to the first half of Grand Lining, sailing in a choppy line as they followed the Viva card's random change of direction. It wasn't like they could go in a straight line in Grand Line anyway. There is no straight line, just like north isn't always north. But then again, it could be Dragon moving about and not staying in one place. The island before them was a barren dry land with no green in sight. The only things that could be seen were the various large stones and a stone-like building right in the center. Ace and Sabo used their observation haki as soon as they got their ship close enough to dock and disembark. Whatever happens, don't kill anyone here, Sabo said seriously to the crew behind him and Ace. But what do we do if they attack, commanders? Someone asked. Don't die, of course, Ace answered with a smirk. And don't kill them, he said seriously. Who knows what Dragon would do if we did? Sabo smirked at them evilly that caused most of them behind him to shiver at the thought of what the world's most wanted man would do. Oh look, here's your first test. He clapped gleefully as a man walked out from behind a stone they neared. What are your reasons for coming? This island has nothing to see. Are you lost? The man scratched his head. There shouldn't be any log poses that points here. Actually, we're here to see Dragon. Sabo gave the man a slight bow and an easygoing smile. Dragon? There's no dragon here. Leave at once, the man said threateningly. How did they know? No, Sabo waved his hands in front of him in an effort to drive away the miscommunication. Not a dragon. We're here to see Dragon. You know, the leader of the Revolutionary Army. There is no Revolutionary Army here, the man growled, not giving away his nervousness. Leave, the young blonde hummed as he thought. I'm pretty sure this is the right place. I mean, this island isn't even on any maps we have, so this island would be a great place for a secret headquarters. I'm going to assume Dragon is in that building over there. He pointed to the only building-like structure in sight. Sabo, this isn't working, Ace sighed before looking at the man. Look, we're in a hurry. Just tell Dragon we're here about his son. Dragon doesn't have a son, the man blurted out in confusion before he realized what he'd said. See, you do know Dragon, Sabo said excitedly. Just then an army of men came around the large rock formation with weapons pointed at the pirates. So what do you think, Sabo? Ace asked as he leaned against his brother's shoulder, uncaring of the threat before them. Sabo only hummed. Before he could answer, someone spoke up, leave them to us, commanders. If you fight, who knows how many you'd fry on accident. Right, poker it is. Sabo shrugged before bringing out a deck of cards and sat down to deal their game. Ace sat in front of him in a huff. Just take away our fun, why don't you? Just let us know if you need help. It was easy to tell that the pirates had the revolutionary arm outnumbered, so Ace and Sabo weren't too worried. That was until reinforcement arrived with reinforcement. Even then, the two continued their card game. Sometime during the fight, one of the revolutionary got close to the commanders and managed to swing their sword down on Ace's head. The man was caught by surprise when his sword went through flames rather than a human body. Damn it, Ace said as he threw down his burning cards and stood up to glare at his attacker. I had a good hand going. He kicked his attacker and took the man's sword. This is taking too long. He used everything he learned from Vista to knock out as many of the revolutionaries as he could with the back of his stolen sword. They both learned to fight with swords and pistols and just about anything else the other commanders could teach them, without letting Luffy know the real reason. They strove to catch up with their baby brother in terms of strength, so they could protect him from anything. As older brothers, they didn't want Luffy to worry about them or protect them. It was their job to protect him. Sabo just sighed at his brother's impatience and shrugged and pulled out his metal pipe from the back of his jacket, instead of joining his brother in the foray. He stood there, observing the battle around them. It seemed that the revolutionary had set up a small team to retrieve the injured and unconscious to pull them aside and away from the fight to let them rest up before they came back in. Well, no wonder their side was getting overwhelmed. Sabo walked up to Ace, hitting a few revolutionaries here and there as they were in his way. Hey, Ace, Sabo tapped his brother's shoulder as the dark-haired teen punched someone out. You know, you could easily put them all to sleep. Ace stood frozen as he realized. Yes, he could have done that and everything would have gone quicker. Why didn't I think of that? He didn't wait for a response before he released his conqueror's haki, taking down all the revolutionary armies around them. He turned around to look at his division members to make sure they were all right, when he noticed most of them were looking at him with wide eyes. I didn't kill them. He defended himself. No, Ace, look behind you. Sabo pointed towards where the headquarters should be. Ace looked behind him to see more revolutionaries coming in their direction not far away. These look much stronger, especially with the light yellow fishman leading them with a young thin female right next to him. Ace panicked and raised a wall of fire, separating their groups. Now what? Ace scratched the side of his head as he turned to face Sabo. I'd say, try talking to them. But that wall isn't helping any. Sabo gave his brother a mocking grin. Karakusagawa Saiken was all the warning they needed. Duck, Sabo yelled out as he pushed Ace down. In a matter of moments, the attack from the fishmen doused the flaming wall and took down more than half of their men who weren't fast enough to react. Ace looked over their men and looked back at Sabo, who was laying on top of him. Okay, now what? Is that all you can say? Sabo huffed before pushing himself up. Rather than answering, he pulled out a box from the inside of his jacket pocket. He put both hands up with the box in one hand. We surrender, he called out, making sure the other side could hear him. We're only here to see Dragon. Look, we even have payment for him. He waved the box, giving them a hopeful smile. Or you could be tricking us and that box could contain a bomb, the blonde girl said, with their group a safe distance away in case the pirates decides to attack. How rude, Sabo huffed as he brought both arms down to his side. If I were to have a bomb, I'd hide it somewhere for you to step on. Could we hurry this up? Ace moaned from the ground, where he laid on his back with his arms out to the sides. Everyone else got their jobs done. We're the only ones left. He then got up and glared at the revolutionaries, lighting up his fist in the process. We could just blow this place up. It'd be faster. Oh, Sabo said, sounding impressed, clapping his hands. That's great idea. It is, the remaining Whitebeards said behind them. Yeah, if we're loud enough and flashy enough, the big man might come out and see what's going on. Sabo grinned at his men. Oh, they, Ace included, said. You guys take care of the others. Sabo waved at the men on the ground. Yes, sir. With that they rushed to get all the downed pirates and revolutionaries to one place, as Ace and Sabo rushed towards the waiting revolutionaries in front of them. As if we'd let you, the girl shouted before going to attack them, along with the fishmen and the rest of the revolutionaries. The two commanders weaved in and out, avoiding all their attacks, punching the ground with haikens, causing the ground around them to explode. Dust covered their vision, but Ace and Sabo were still able to avoid being attacked by using their observation hack. Eventually, the fishmen caught Ace by surprise. Hearing Ace's startled voice distracted Sabo long enough for the girl to take him down. We suggest the rest of you surrender, the fishman said, walking out of the cloud of dust with an unconscious Ace. The girl followed right behind with Sabo in the same state as his brother. The pirates who were tending to the injured looked at them in surprise before shrugging to each other and raised their hands in surrender. Sabo did originally say they'd surrender to them anyway, before Ace decided it'd take too long to talk them into letting them see Dragon. Divided by. Sabo woke up to the sounds of voices around him. He moaned, grabbing the head of the person laying next to him close to his chest. He sighed in relief when the room went quiet. Boys, get up yoy. 5 more minutes, Pops. Both Sabo and Ace mumbled with Ace's voice muffled by Sabo's chest. Ace then wrapped his arms around Sabo, keeping them both warm and comfortable. There was a sigh and a girl's voice muttered, I can't believe you made these spoiled brats your commanders. Sabo tuned out whatever else was said, intent on getting a few more minutes of sleep. But there was something nagging in the back of his mind, something he's forgetting, something that's missing. The bed feels weird also. It was too still. There wasn't the slight sway from the waves hitting the side of the ship. We got a message from Luffy yoy. Luffy. Sabo shouted as he sat up with Ace following him, both wide-eyed and alert. That got the attention of everyone in the room. Both he and Ace looked around and they noticed that they weren't on Moby Dick and that Marco was on the den mushy that was placed on their bed. Where are we? Ace asked, scratching the back of his head. My office, which is also my bedroom, a deep, gruff voice answered. Who are you? They both asked at the same time. Dragon. There was a moment of silence as the boys processed this information. No way, they both said seriously. There's no way. Luffy's too cute to be your son. It's true, someone from their division said. After you two were caught, we were supposed to be taken to their prison, but then this guy, he jerked his thumb towards the tall, gruff-looking revolutionary leader, brought us to his office instead after learning we're with Whitebeard. We went ahead and explained everything to him, since both of our commanders were out of commission. And to think, no one even knew our boss even had a kid. The girl glared at Dragon with her arms crossed. We're getting off topic yoy, the den mushy said. Right. Sabo jumped up to leap at the snail. You said Luffy sent a message. Is he okay? How is he? Did you tell him we're coming? Both Sabo and Ace asked. First, hands off the snail, Sabo. I don't need you to be hanging up on me after I answer your questions yoy. Sabo clicked his tongue in annoyance before setting the phone back down on the bed in front of Ace. Phone's down, Pops, Ace said. He laid on his stomach with his arms propped up to hold up his head with a huge smile on his face. Happy to hear that his little brother was able to call home. So, it wasn't Luffy who called. They called themselves Tontata Tribe. From what we gathered, they're a tribe of dwarves, little people yoy. Anyway, they came across Luffy on accident, and Luffy asked them to pass on a message to us. He doesn't want us to come yet. He said to wait yoy, Marco said. Luffy doesn't want us to come. Sabo said, looking torn. Yet yoy, he wants us to come, just not yet. I think he's planning something. There was some snickering from the other side of the den mushy. I don't think little Luffy knows how to plan. They heard Kingdu's bland voice over the snickering. He tends to ruin them. Luya can plan if he wants, Law defended. Sometimes. Maybe. Never mind. I've never seen him plan anything. Even his meals are random. So, what? We have to sit still and wait until he says it's okay to go, Pops? Ace practically yelled. Ace, Whitebeard's voice came over. I'm sure Luffy has a good reason for all this. If we go now, before he's ready for us, things may go wrong for him. That calmed Ace down. He wouldn't ever want to put Luffy in more danger than he already is. Oh, right. Besides, Whitebeard continued, it sounds like your brother as well. Leo, the one that passed on the message, said he's being well taken care of, and they'll call us with updates as often as they can. I was told you have payment for my cooperation, Dragon cut in, looking at the boys. I take all my men out of Dressrosa and stay clear of the place, right? Oh, yeah, Sabo pulled out the box out of his jacket pocket. I'm hanging up yoy. Just a fair warning, Dragon. Their version of payment is torture to some yoy. And Marco hung up. Dragon raised an eyebrow at the two on the bed who looked at him with bright smiles of happiness. Don't listen to Pops. We brought our treasure box for you. Look, Ace said excitedly. And Sabo took of the lid to show them a box completely filled with newspaper clippings and pictures. These are copies though. The originals are back at home. So you can keep these. Everyone, including the Whitebeard pirates, crowded the bed to look in the box. Eventually, the pirates backed away nervously. Yeah, so, would someone point us to where we could get dinner? That had the revolutionaries raising their eyebrows at their reaction. Why don't the rest of you go on ahead and show them the cafeteria and someone bring us back something to eat? Dragon said. I'll stay too, the girl said. I'm Koala, an instructor here by the way. I'm Hack, also an instructor, the fishman said. I'm also curious. All right. Bring enough food for the 5 of us, Dragon said before shooing everyone out of his cramped office. I suggest bringing enough food for 30 people. A pirate laughed as they all left. Dragon, Koala, and Hack already had a few pictures in their hands, studying them and didn't hear what was said. The 3 of them looked confused at what they were seeing. These are mostly pictures of a girl, all of the same girl. I thought they'd be pictures of Luffy, Koala said in confusion. Those are Luffy. Isn't he cute? Then they both started digging through the box, and Sabo finally picked one out and handed it to Dragon. This one was taken about 4 months ago. This time it was a picture of a young boy in an overly large shorts and t-shirt with dirt, leaves, and twigs sticking all over him, hugging a tiger's head happily smiling. The poor tiger had a panicked look, wanting to be anywhere but there being held by the strange kid. Lou wanted to be friends with the tiger and wouldn't take no for an answer. Took him almost an hour to catch him, Sabo said proudly. Pops wouldn't let him keep Stripey Tiger roar. Ace laughed, even after Lou begged and begged. Grandpops eventually had to tell Lou why he couldn't bring Stripey Tiger Roar with us. Stripey Tiger Roar? Hack asked slowly. Luffy has bad naming sense. They both said as they continued picked through the box for another picture. Divided by. When 3 revolutionaries returned back to the cafeteria from delivering dinner to their boss's room, they went to get their own food and sat down telling the others what happened. I swear it. I've never seen Dragon look that uncomfortable before. More like he's always expressionless. Even Koala and Hack looked like they wanted to leave but couldn't. There's no way I'd want to be stuck there, so we just left the food without saying anything. A part of me wants to know what happened, while the other part is too scared. I mean, even Dragon looked scared. The pirates who overheard this and laughed. That's because our 2 commanders are very doting to their youngest and craziest brother. You say they're spoiled, but you haven't met Luffy yet. Those 2, plus their other brother that isn't here, spoils the brat with anything and everything he wants. I don't know. Marco seems to think everyone at home spoils him. So, this torture that Phoenix was talking about, a revolutionary asked. That would be when our dear commanders talk about their adventures with Luffy. The things the kid gets up to makes you wonder about your sanity. They can go on nonstop, unless one falls asleep, or it's time to eat. The pirates laughed. There was this one time Juru. That Speed Juru, our information specialist, was trying to get one of our prisoner to cough up some information. Well, he had this bright idea to use the kids. Ace and Sabo were only 13 at the time, and Luffy was 10. Juru told Ace and Sabo that someone had wanted to hear about their adventures. Granted, those 2 would never go around talking about their precious brother to just any stranger, so Juru introduced the guy as his good friend, brought the prisoner to his room and everything. Long story short, the man went through what your boss is going through right now. The poor guy broke down after an hour with the kids. They were so mad to find out that their Luffy stories were used as torture to get information. Marco thought it was creative and less messier than their usual torture and wanted to continue it, but they refused, saying that Luffy is too precious to share any random person. The sad thing is, most of us have seen the things those kids have gotten themselves into. Let's see, we never let them play hide and seek when we don't plan on being somewhere for long. The game can go on for days. They only break for food and sleep. Mealtime with them is like a war zone. Stay away from them. Those are just the tame stories. Just wait till you hear the one with the tiger, sea king, and alligator. Divided by. The next morning Ace and Sabo woke up to Dragon's version of Fist of Love. Wake up. They both sat up in their shared bed rubbing their heads. Why? It's not like we have a reason to be up yet. Phoenix gave me permission to keep you boys here until my son needs you, Dragon replied. As thanks for updating me on my son, I'm going to train you personally. So get up and get ready. What? You heard me. Meet me on the training ground in 15 minutes, Dragon said, then left. Well, at least we know for sure he's related to Shitty Gramps, Ace moaned, still rubbing his head. This disguise is stupid. Ace grumbled from his seat on the deck floor on one of the revolutionaries' ship that was pretending to be a merchant ship. They were currently docked in an underground cove with some of the other shady ships. My Whitebeards. We look like old geezers. Hush, who cares about the stupid beard? Sabo chided him. I'm more worried about Luffy. The Tontatas hasn't seen him in a month, and the last time they did, he wasn't looking so good. Stupid selfish brother, just had to give us more work. Ace crossed his arms. It'd be so much easier just to save him and get out. But no. He tells us we have to help save some toys, a princess, steal some files from a lab, and destroy some factory. At least he was able to get us some useful information. Law said, you guys ready to go save the boss's son? A girl, Koala, from the Revolutionary Army asked them cheerily. Luffy, we're saving Luffy, not your boss's son, Ace growled. Same thing, she waved it off. So Hack and Law will be joining the tournament to see if they can find Luffy. Ace is going to incapacitate this sugar person, Sabo is going to infiltrate the laboratory and capture Caesar, and I'm going to destroy a factory. The rest of your division, who will be mingling with the people, will cause some sort of commotion. Hopefully, that will be enough to make them want to run and into the safety of the marine ships. After all that, some of your commanders will come and help us with the rest of your crew members while we storm the castle. Right? Sabo nodded. We'll leave the princess to the Tontatas. First, we need to meet up with them to see if they have any updates. No need to worry about our men. Division 2 has all the best people and equipment to cause mass mayhem, if needed. Go guys, go on ahead, the green fishman, Hack, said. I'll go on ahead and sign us up for the tournament. Call me if there's any new information. 6 months, Ace grumbled. 6 fucking months. I can't believe it's taking us this long to save Lou. Calm down, Ace, Sabo said. There was a lot of preparing to do. And what with getting all these groups to work together, of course it was going to take time. Not to mention, this tournament is a great cover for us. He's right, Law said. It also gave Luya time to send us useful information. I'm quite surprised he was able to think so far ahead, or to be able to think at all. That's because he doesn't think, Sabo said proudly. He just does what he wants. It's all instinct. I can't tell if you're proud of him or insulting him, Koala said. This brother of yours sounds crazy from all the stories you've told us. He even trusted you guys to come save him after he left without saying anything to anyone. That's because he is. Ace grinned before frowning. And why wouldn't we? He's our brother. We're not going to let some stupid flamingo take him. Whitebeard, Akagami, the revolutionary, and the Marines. Yeah, Doflamingo isn't going to regret it, Sabo grinned evilly. This brother of yours is amazing. To be able to move that many fractions just to save him, Koala said. As soon as Dragon heard, he just immediately said he's helping. Even though you guys didn't ask for help. Guess his son means more to him that he lets on. None of us even knew he had a son until then. Better that way, Sabo nodded. If too many people knew about Luffy's bloodline, a lot of people would be going after his head. I still can't believe Dragon had the guts to tell Grandpops that he's keeping us for 4 months. Yeah, Ace grumbled. At least we were able to learn a few things, though he could have gone about a different way. It was almost like training with Gramps all over again. They reached the base of Flower Hill, where they had agreed to meet a representative of the Tontata tribe. You people must be Lucy's comrades, a small toy soldier greeted them. It's a toy, Ace deadpanned. Not just any toy, it's a tiny one-legged toy soldier. How rude, the toy said. You think Lucy held high regards for his comrades? Sorry about that. Sabo crouched as best he could to be eye level with the toy soldier. My brother is a little high-strung right now. We were told to meet someone here to see the Tontata tribe. Yes, that would be me. Come. The toy hopped on one leg and turned to show them the way to the hidden tunnel to Greenbit. We don't have time to lose. Lucy seemed to be unwell the last we saw him. Can you tell us how he looked? Law asked. A month ago, the last time we saw him, he gave us a drawing with what we think is the layout of the castle. It was a crude drawing, so we're assuming it's the layout of the castle. Ace whistled. Didn't think he had it in him to think that far ahead. Yes, well, the toy hesitated. That was when he told us that he can't meet us anymore and to keep away from him when we do cross path again. I'm not sure what that all means, but right after he told us to leave right away. So we had no choice but leave Flower Hill, where we've been meeting. Before leaving, we hid ourselves in our tunnel and looked to make sure the boy was all right. But he passed out where we left him, and then Doflamingo showed up. Blue probably knew Joker was coming and told you to leave, to keep your meetings a secret, Law mused. They're probably experimenting with him again, Sabo said worriedly. Maybe that's why he wants us to steal some files in the lab. He doesn't know what drugs they are or what they're doing to him. Again, Koala looked taken aback. You heard right. Again, Ace growled. There's a reason why that bastard only wanted Lou back, rather than taking us with him. Doflamingo was acting strange that day. The soldier interrupted them. He actually looked worried about the boy. Viola said that wasn't the first time he did something out of character. After an incident where Luffy was hallucinating about monsters coming after him, Doflamingo actually comforted him and let him sleep in his room. Viola, you mean Violet? The person that Mingo's forcing to work for him? Right. Sabo confirmed. That's right, the soldier said. She's the second daughter of the former king of Dressrosa. Doflamingo wants her for her devil fruit ability. She has the ability of clairvoyance. He's using her to overlook the kingdom for any disturbance. She agreed to work for him in order to keep her father alive. So the former king is still living then, Law concluded. That's right. We're here. The toy soldier opened the door at the end of the underground tunnel. The 4 humans widened their eyes at the sight of the little people, having never seen one before. After their introduction, they went down to business and started their planning. Divided by. Law had safely made into the Colosseum to meet up with Hack, without Luffy's bad drawing of the castle layout. He made sure to memorize it before handing it back to the Tontatas so they could make use of it to save their princess. The drawing was bad, but at least it gave them the gist of where things were, especially the underground passages. Law and Hack walked around the Colosseum, observing the other contestants. Hack paused in his walk when he felt a tapping on his shoulder. "I see him," Law murmured and inconspicuously pointed out a small thin boy with shaggy black hair. "He seems pretty happy despite being a prisoner here," Hack said as they watched the boy in the helmet bounce from one place to the other, talking to other contestants, though most were giving him a wide berth and then get into an argument with someone. "We should go help him out." "No, wait," Law said. "He knows we're here, but he's not coming to us. There has to be a reason. Let him do his thing. If we approach him like we know him, it may cause some problems." He pointed to Luffy's leg where the bomb anklet rests. Hack only nodded with disgust clear on his face. "How are you sure he knows we're here? Would he be able to recognize you through the disguise?" "Trust me," Law grinned to himself. "He knew we were here before we even set foot on this island." After looking around for a good half hour, Luffy bounced right in front of them. "Hiya," he greeted them. "I'm Lucy. Nice to meet ya, Hack," the fishman replied slowly, unsure of how respond to the exceedingly happy prisoner. "I'm Tora," Law said as he looked the boy up and down, checking for any visible injuries. "Are you a contestant also?" "Yup. I'm in Block C. What about you two?" "We're both in Block D," Hack answered. "Are you sure you should be participating?" "You're just a scrawny brat," Law taunted with a grin, happy to see no visible injuries. "What? Take that back. I'm super strong. Just you wait till I kick your ass." He was about to continue his tirade but was stopped by a man super short shorts and a horn-billed cat. "Lucy, you shouldn't be talking to them," the man chided. "Deli, but why not?" The boy pouted. "Because you might be fighting them eventually. Ugh, you know what? Forget it. Daffy wants to see you." "Oh, okay." The boy skipped away a few steps before turning around. "Where?" "On the top floor of the viewing area." "Right." He took a couple of steps before walking back again. "How do I get there?" "If you would just slow down and wait for me, I was going to take you there," the man grumbled as he led the way. "Seriously, why does Daffy even keep you? You're just a pain in the ass," he continued grumbling, while Luffy laughed merrily as they walked away. That boy, Hack wasn't sure if it would be rude to continue that train of thought, has a few screws loose. "Yes, I know," Law sighed. Hey, you can't talk to that person that way." A man with green hair styled standing up came up to them. "Don't you know who he is?" "Who?" "The kid," Hack said confused. The kid. You don't call that person an old man. He's the great Lucy Senpai, the one and only champion of the Colosseum." The man looked about ready to faint from overexcitement. He quickly recovered and continued on normally. "You guys must have just came." They nodded. "You should have came a few days earlier." Lucy Senpai was still fighting the gladiators up until yesterday as a demonstration of what to expect from their champion. 2 days ago, he even fought the previous champion and won. There's a rumor going around that Diamante, oh, that's the previous champion, was jealous that Lucy Senpai is the champion or something like that, so the king let them duke it out. You should have seen it. It was awesome. Nothing like the demonstration. It was like he wasn't even trying in the other matches. Diamante came out a bloodied mess and dead. The best part was Lucy Senpai came out mostly unscathed. He's the best. You wouldn't happen to know if there's a recording of that match somewhere, do you? Law asked. That's a good question. If there is, I want it. The man gushed before walking away to sing his praises of Lucy to someone else. Who was that? Hack asked. Who knows? Law shrugged before taking a slip of paper out of his pocket. What's that? Lucia gave it to me before he left. Protect Rebecca. Who the hell is that? Law glared at the note. Divided by. I would like to thank you for lending us a helping hand, even though we didn't ask for your help. I know how you revolutionaries like to keep a low profile. All we needed was to make sure we didn't get any of your men caught in the crossfire. Whitebeard said to a tall cloaked man standing next to him on Moby Dick, both facing Dressrosa. They were docked close enough for them to see the island but far enough that they wouldn't be recognized. Nonsense, the man said in a deep grumble. That is something I should be saying. You've been taking care of my son in my stead. You've done more than I've ever done. Seems the ability to raise children never made it to the monkey family. Even so, I will not sit by while my son's freedom is taken from him again. I've done nothing but to give him a safe place to live. It is those 3 other brats that have been raising him. If anyone is to be thanked, it should be them. Dragon nodded and sighed in exasperation. Law, Ace, and Sabo. So I've heard. Many times. Those 2 brats wouldn't shut up about him and would talk about him every chance they got. The men they brought with them were no different. Yes, the crew loves him as if they were their own children. Ace and Sabo included. Seems those 2 raised your boy since he was about 2, so I heard. Law joined us a few years after and grew attached to the boy he calls his sister. And you ended up being their father figure, someone yelled, causing the rest of the crew still on deck to laugh. And how did Akagami get mixed into all this? They both looked to the ship anchored not too far from them, where the red-haired captain stood facing the island with a scowl, ready to take down any unexpected ships that comes their way. He was to fight the marine ships that Sengoku is sending with Virgo and his men, while letting Garp's ships slip by them to house the civilians. He's entrusted his treasured hat and his left arm to that boy's future. Whitebeard smiled. That boy of yours has this charm that makes people flock to him. Just like his mother, Dragon smiled. Just be happy they didn't spoil him to the point that he can't function normally once he decides to set sail. Yoi. Marco smirked from behind the both of them, causing everyone who heard to laugh merrily. They were all excited to finally get their youngest brother back. I have no objection with him wanting to be the next pirate king, Dragon said proudly. Divided by. Ace impatiently snatched the baby Den Mushy out of his pocket and answered it. What? He growled. Someone's a grouch, Law replied. We ran into Luffy. And he passed on a message. Does anyone there know who Rebecca is? All his note says is to protect her. Rebecca is the daughter of the first daughter of the former king of Dressrosa, the toy soldier answered. I don't believe they've ever met. Well, he says to protect her, so I'm assuming she's participating in the tournament, Law sighed. She is, the toy growled, even after I told her not to. She wants to win in order to defeat Doflamingo. She doesn't know about our plans. How's Luffy? Is he okay? Sabo asked, taking the Den from Ace's hand. He looks good. In fact, he's doing great by the looks of it. Hack sounded amused. Saw him run around, about ready to bounce off the walls. We heard he fought one of the top executive, Diamante, Law informed them. Yeah, we just finished watching a recording of it right now. It's why Ace is being a grouch. Sabo laughed. You have a recording? Hack asked in surprise. Yeah, the Tontat has snuck in to watch, Sabo said. That bastard hurt Luffy, Ace growled. We heard he came out mostly unscratched. Law mused, and Diamante is dead. Actually, Lou doesn't look right. It was like watching a crazed maniac having way too much fun killing this guy. He wasn't even trying, Sabo reported, worried. He got cut a few times from not evading. He just went in without any regards to himself. About midway through the fight, it looked like Lou was fighting with himself. I'm guessing they did something to mess with his mind just before this and let him run rampant. He was wearing a gold gladiator's helmet, with a white beard and mustache at the beginning, but lost them during the fight. He's not trying, Koala exclaimed. That's not trying. That man is one of the top executive, one of the strongest in Doflamingo's family. Yeah, Ace sighed in defeat. Lou's much better than this. I'm guessing even Doflamingo doesn't know the extent of Luffy's strength. He must be hiding it from them. And he struggled to keep himself from doing too much midway through. Must have gotten his mind back or something. That fight between Luffy and Diamante came about after an argument with Doflamingo. Diamante was upset about the fact Doflamingo doesn't trust him enough to win the tournament for him, the toy explained. That's right, a Tontata named Leo said. We snuck in the castle to look for Princess Mancheri and saw the whole thing. Doflamingo said they would hold a competition to see who would be entered in the tournament as the champion. After Diamante left, Doflamingo told Luffy to take Diamante out because he doesn't want someone who doesn't listen to him and his family. He said to dispose of the traitor. I see, Law said thoughtfully. Either Doflamingo knows the full extent of Luffy's strength, or he was confident that he would win. Good to know there's one less opponent. Keep a copy of that recording. He said the last part is an afterthought. Of course we are, Ace grinned. It's going with our other Luffy memories. You're what? Koala said looking disturbed. Well, Luffy's leaving us one day to set sail on his own. We're keeping a scrapbook of sorts to remember him by, Sabo shrugged. You three are creepy, she said with a shudder. Almost stalker-like. Speaking of stalker, Hack said, there's this strange guy with green hair that seems to be a huge fan of your brother. Keep him away from Luffy. Both Ace and Sabo shouted, and Sabo hung up on them. Then another call came in. This time it was Thatch, who was mingling with the townspeople and to buy a few supplies for their kitchen. You won't believe it. Seems little Lucy is a big thing here. Some of the people call him the hero of the Colosseum. They even have merchandises of him. Thatch laughed. We have to buy some, Sabo said excitedly. Already did, Thatch said. Well, buy some for us, Ace demanded. Thatch laughed and hung up on them to report back to the ship. Stalker, Koala and the toy soldier deadpanned at them. Divided by. The tournament has started and Blanca just finished. The winner was some strange guy with a paper bag over his head named Mr. Store. Block B participants were starting to walk out to the stage. Luffy had wanted to stay and watch, but Doflamingo asked him to take care of some disturbance in town instead. So here he was, walking down the streets with Violet towards the disturbance. He really wished he could control his tears, but it was hard with all the toys around. He would sometimes hear the townspeople say he sheds his tears because he was crying for them when they were attacked by pirates or other unruly people. That was only because he never came to town unless Doflamingo tells him to take care of any threats. After he lost his disguise during the fight with Diamante, the people were wary of him. He couldn't tell if it was because they recognized him from his wanted poster with his brothers or if it was what he did to Diamante. Now they treated him as before, their savior. Violet, Luffy whispered low enough for only her to hear when they neared the area. I know these people. There's going to be this guy named Haruta. After I finish here, go with him. He'll keep you safe. Don't worry about Mingo. I'll just make up something for you. She nodded and didn't say anything, trusting Luffy and his friends, already knowing of their plans. They walked another couple of blocks before turning right. The pirates there widened their eyes in surprise at seeing Luffy. One almost called out his name before a woman hiding in her flower store cheered at his arrival, followed by the rest civilians there. Lucy, it's Lucy. We're saved. There were other citizens that followed her cheer. They all went quiet when the boy spoke to the pirates. Please leave, he said with no recognition in his eyes, pretending he didn't know them. Why should we leave? We're here to enjoy ourselves, a small-built man said. Haruta immediately understood that Luffy couldn't risk exposing himself here. The others with him nearly sputtered in confusion. Go somewhere else. You're disturbing the people, and you're making me miss the next round. Luffy sent him a teary glare. Instead of waiting for another retort, he released a larger than usual amount of his conqueror's haki to ensure that anyone nearby wouldn't mess up their plans. Once everyone went down, Luffy whispered, "Sorry, Haruta," and walked away, leaving Violet to clean up the mess. He better be, Haruta muttered from his place on the ground, where he pretended to sleep with everyone else. He just gave me more work to do. He looked up and saw Violet. You must be Viola. I'm Haruta. Nice to meet you. Likewise, Viola smiled. Thank you for playing along. He really had hoped that Doflamingo wouldn't send him out for errands during the tournament. Couldn't be helped then. Let's get these people to safety. There's a marine ship ready for the civilians. The others will go to another ship that's on its way here. Just leave them at the pier for now. He got to work, lifting a woman over his shoulder as he asked, "How is he?" He's crying. Is he really crying for the people here? Luffy, you don't know. I would have thought his friends would have known about it, she said as she picked up a few of the sleeping toys. Known about what? Haruta sent her a confused look. He can hear the hearts of people. The toys on this island were once human, turned into toys by Sugar's power. That explains it. We know about the whole reading the here part, just wasn't sure what triggered it here. I see he still has no control over his haki. It was leaking on his way here. No, he says he can't control himself when presented with overwhelming feelings. The toys want to be free and to be remembered again. Haruta nodded. I can understand that. That boy's been through a lot. I know. I was here when he was first taken, she said sadly. I just wish I was strong enough to help him. What you're doing now is good enough. He doesn't blame you. It's all Doflamingo's fault. Divided by. Hack whistled as he and Law watched Luffy fight his block. How old did you say he is? Normally, the champion had the luxury of only enter the tournament at the end, but Luffy thought it'd be boring just to watch and begged Doflamingo to let him participate like everyone else. Just turned 14 not too long ago. Why? Law turned to give the fishman a questioning look. Never seen a kid that small beat that many armed men nearly twice his size so effortlessly. And that giant. Did you see him? He downed that giant in one punch. That was an Elbaf warrior for goodness sakes. Law just shrugged. He sparred with Ors Jr. Once for fun. Law nearly laughed at the face Hack made. Hack shook himself out of his stupor to watch the match once more. I still think there's something wrong with him mentally. Or maybe he's still under the influence of whatever from when he fought Diamante. He looks like he's having too much fun. That's because he is having fun. To him, this is fun. He's not killing anyone, and he knows we're here. I've never seen him kill someone like he's enjoying it. He only kills if that person is a threat to his family. Law smiled sadly. He then frowned at the noise coming from the green-haired man. The winner of Block B, Bartolomeo, a few windows away from them. The crazed man was drooling and still singing praises of his sister. Law wasn't sure he liked that the vulgar man was obsessing over his sister. The first round finished with the winners being Mr. Store for Block A, Bartolomeo for Block B, Lucy for Block C, and Hack for Block D. Law had knocked Rebecca out and let Hack win so that he would have time to take a look around and wait for Ace and Sabo. So far the plan is proceeding as planned. The Marines have stormed the island to save the citizens from the pirates, leading the people to Marines' ships as a safe haven. Whitebeard docked a ways away. All but a couple of commanders have engaged with Doflamingo's family. Shanks is currently engaged with the Marine ships following Virgo. Law hasn't heard back from Ace, Sabo, Koala, or any of the Tontatas yet, so he was a little worried about them. The fighters were currently on break to let the next round competitors rest a little before continuing. Law watched as the guards carry out another stretcher with an injured contestant. He walked over to the girl he was told to protect. He was about to say something to her, but was interrupted by a guard asking them to follow him for treatment. But we're not injured, Law said. It's just a precautionary checkup. the guard insisted as he grabbed Law by the arm. They were about to be dragged off by the guard when Luffy walked up to them. "Hey," he said to the guard, who saluted the boy. "There's this guy over there that just fell over." He pointed over to the opposite direction. Once the guard left, the boy walked away, but not before giving Law a grin. Law held Rebecca by the arm and asked her to trust him as they followed at a distance. "What do you think you're doing?" She hissed at him, tugging slightly at her arms. She could already tell she wouldn't be able to win against him with how strong he was holding her. "Just trust me. Don't you know who that person is? He's Doflamingo's right-hand man. He's ruthless. Anyone who sides with Doflamingo is my enemy." Law had learned through the booings and yells from the audience that the citizens here doesn't think very highly of her or their former king. Through the toy soldier, he's learned how Doflamingo had taken over the kingdom. It was despicable how the warlord puppeteered the whole thing. "Just trust me," he repeated, not wanting to say anything too much in case someone overhears. They turned a corner to see Luffy standing there waiting for them. Law chanced to look to check if anyone was nearby. Luffy laughed at him. "You worry too much. Of course, I'd made sure no one's around. And you look funny. With you around, there's always something to worry about." Law rubbed his temple with his free hand. "And it's a disguise." Luffy turned to Rebecca and offered his hand. "Hi, I'm Luffy." "I know who you are." She glared at him, ignoring his hand. "And isn't it Lucy?" Luffy looked to his hand in confusion before bringing it up to rub the back of his head. "Oh, okay." He grinned. "Mr. Soldier is pretty mad at you for entering the tournament, but don't worry. He's not mad anymore. I promised him that you'd be protected." He gave her a laugh. "Mr. Soldier?" she asked suspiciously. "Yeah, he's so cool." "How do you know Mr. Soldier?" Trow can explain." Luffy tilted his head to the side with a frown on his face. "I have to go. Mingo's looking for me." "Trow, whatever you do, don't follow the guards. Go down this hall and get out of the Colosseum." He left after giving his instruction. "I thought your name is Tora," she said before thanking him for his coat to cover her barely their armor as it would be too eye-catching with all the gold. "My real name's Trafalgar Law. Luya can't seem to pronounce my name correctly, so he calls me Trow. I can't use my real name here. I'm wanted by Joker. Believe me when I say, Luffy hates Joker, and his real name is Luffy. I'm not quite clear as to why he's called Lucia here, but I've seen him kill people on Doflamingo's order without batting an eye, and he's just a kid who can easily be manipulated. He may look like that, but he's actually 14, and he's been killing for the bastard since he was 3, or so I heard. He and 2 of my other brothers were freed years ago from that man. Joker caught wind of where he was, and Luya willingly followed him back to save us. He did all this for us. Look, it's a really long story that we don't have time for right now. Mr. Soldier, or whatever, and a few others are working with us to take down Joker. More like, we only came here to save Luya, but that selfish idiot just had to give us more work. You're going to save Dressrosa." "Yeah, that's what Luya wants, so that's what we're doing. If Joker only knew who he actually kidnapped, I'm sure he would have second thoughts about taking him back." Law grinned evilly. "It's a trap. I knew we shouldn't trust him," Rebecca said when they reached a hall where metal bars blocked their path. "It's not a trap. Shambles." They were instantly on the other side of the bars. "Luya would never send us into a trap. Now, let's go." They went from one hall to another, both hiding their presence and sneaking past a few random guards. Soon, they see Doflamingo's back and quickly ducked into a nearby closet. They cautiously stuck their heads out to watch as the man with crossed arms tapped his foot impatiently. Law had to quash his urge for revenge at seeing the man who killed Khorasan for the first time in years. He had to shake his head at Rebecca's questioning look. He can't afford to be sidetracked. His revenge has to be put on hold. Right now, Luffy's freedom is his top priority. His time spent with Luffy and the Whitebeard pirates dulled his need for revenge that he couldn't believe he'd almost forgotten about it. The sight of the warlord so close to him again brought it back. But for now, he'll suppress it in order to help Luffy. Even then, he still couldn't help the tight grip he had on his sword. A few minutes later, they hear someone running from the opposite direction. Then they could see Luffy jump into Doflamingo's arm and was being held up in the air and swung around. "Mingo, finally found you," the boy laughed. "You're late," the man chided, but Law and Rebecca could hear the fondness in his voice. Doflamingo brought the boy down from the air and let the boy hang off his neck and sit on one of his arms. "Hee, sorry, stupid guard was too busy to take me, and I got lost. Where's Deli? He always brings me and makes sure I don't get lost." Luffy pouted. "If you remember which guard, I'll be sure to kill him for that. As for Dellinger, there's some problems outside right now. He and the rest of the family are out there to deal with it. And that brings us to why I called for you." Doflamingo put the boy down and held his hand as they walked towards the viewing area with a wide hole in the wall for him to watch the battles. The 2 peeping couldn't see them once they walked away from the hall. "I need you to finish the last round quickly so we can go clean up the mess out there." "What's going on outside? Is that why Violet didn't come back yet?" "I'm hungry." "Don't expect to see Violet again," Doflamingo growled. "She's betrayed the family. And you know what happens to traitors. Oh, but I really liked her, Luffy whined. She always brings me food and fun stuff to play. Now, I'm sure Monet wouldn't mind taking her place. Run along. Your match is about to start. Okay, toilet first. Let me guess, you don't remember where it is. Doflamingo deadpanned. Nope, take me there. Law and Rebecca waited until they were gone before they quietly walked out of the closet and went the opposite direction, with Law internally fuming at the fact that that man dared to lay a hand on his sister. Divided by. This time Law and Rebecca found themselves in the hidden docks, where their disguised ship anchored. Law looked around to see Doflamingo's underlings forcing toys to carry heavy-looking crates to some merchant ships. Seems they were in a hurry to get all the crates out of Dressrosa before any could get damaged in the ensuing battle above them. There was so much going on and too many people for anyone to notice anything strange about them boarding their ship. They headed straight to the cabin once they were on board. Seems Sabo and Koala, still in disguise, were already there with a strange white fluffy cloud-looking tied-up man. What happened to you? Law said in reference to Sabo's bandages. And where are the tontatas you said were helping you? More like, what didn't happen? Sabo gave him a tense grin. The little people went off to save their princess. Everything was going fine. In fact, I was beating the crap out of this bastard. Then he just had to go and tell me what a fine specimen our brother was. Then everything went blank and let's just say that everything went to shit. Gas-ass nearly suffocated me a few times. Luckily, I accidentally kicked him into a sea-stone handcuff that just happened to be hanging on a wall. I had to use my pipe and toss it on him. Those things are amazing. The minute it landed on him, he just fell. Pathetic. Had Koala cuffed him properly once we got here. Would have been easier if Lou didn't want him alive. He tossed Law a stack of files. Lou's going to need your expertise once we get off this hellhole. Who's that? Sabo nodded his head to Rebecca. Rebecca, yeah. Law answered distractedly as he flipped through the file. He scowled as the read through them. Nice to meet you. Sabo held out his hand to the pink-haired girl. I'm Sabo, and this is Koala. Rebecca gave them both a hesitant handshake. You too. Are you sure trusting Lucy is a good idea? I mean, she held up both hands when a frown showed on Sabo's face. We just saw him, and he was acting very friendly with Doflamingo. She doesn't trust the so-called right-hand man of Doflamingo's, Law answered distractedly. Sabo placed his head in his hand and grinned. We trust Luffy with our lives, just as he trusts us with his. It doesn't matter to me if you believe in him or not. We're doing what we want. I don't know the kid, but an order is an order. Boss says to help these guys out, so I am. Koala winked. Besides, freeing people is part of my job description. I'm just having trouble wrapping my mind around the fact that you guys want to help him. He doesn't look like he needs any help. He looks like he's doing just fine with Doflamingo. He even goes around killing people for that man. Sabo, Koala yelled in surprise at the blonde. Rebecca raised a shaky hand to her face and felt the small cut from the knife embedded in the wall behind her. What happened to your rule of not hurting the opposite sex? Law asked with his eyes still on the files. No such rule exists when someone says bad things about my dear little brother, Sabo said, still smiling, though Rebecca could see the coldness in his eyes. I don't know about Koala, but we've killed many people. Maybe you shouldn't trust us either, but as it stands, your life is now in our hand. So you have no choice but to just be quiet and let us do our thing. He let out a frustrated sigh as he ran a hand through his hair. What's taking Ace so long? He's probably having trouble. That place is where they make the toys. He's probably trying not to involve any bystanders. What are you doing? Law finally looked up from the papers in his hands when Sabo took out his Den Mushi. Giving Ace motivation to finish faster, Sabo smirked. Ace, what's taking you so long? You're the last one. Shut up, Sabo, Ace whispered, indicating he's currently hiding. There's so many of those fucking toys. They just keep coming from, I don't know, thin air. Those things are relentless. What am I supposed to do about them? Didn't Luffy say they're supposed to be human? So don't kill them, right? And the little people are stuck in some kind of goo thing from this disgusting blob guy thing. Maybe, Sabo said flippantly, but you might to hurry. Luffy's in trouble. Huh, what do you mean? I thought he was fine. Seems this Peter. He waved his hand towards the gas man. Kesar, Koala corrected him. Guy that I caught did some strange experiments on Lou. Sabo smirked evilly. There's a huge stack of paper with reports of everything they did. What? Koala winced at the sound of something exploding over the phone. Then came some incomprehensible muttering from the other end of the call. Die. Whoa, wait, Ace. Small, think small, Sabo yelled worriedly. In Kai. And the whole island shook, causing some rebels to fall in their cave and the ships to shake. Hikin, seems Ace wasn't done and more rebels fell, until there was a hole in the cave roof. Shit, Sabo said. Koala, go out there and see if Ace needs to be fished out. You know, Law drawled, that was completely your fault. Yeah, but I did stop him from going all out, Sabo said sheepishly. At least the island is still intact. Koala dragged a sopping wet Ace. his disguise long gone, with many tontatas hanging off him, back into their cabin. The minute Ace's eyes landed on Caesar, he lit himself on fire, causing Koala to jump away from him and drying himself in the process. Cheater! Ace charged at the bound man, only to be stopped by Law. Let me go. I'm going to kill him. Calm down, Ace, yeah. And it's Caesar, yeah. Lua needs him alive, and I have a few questions for him about these experiments. Ace finally relented at Law's word. Instead, he stalked up to the bound man and kicked him hard enough to fly back into some crates. And who's that? He glared at the pink-haired girl sitting in the far corner, away from them. Rebecca, was all Sabo said, giving her a look as if daring her to say anything. Oh, Ace calmed back to normal. The girl Lu said to protect. Okay, so now what? While I was fishing you out, Koala huffed, I noticed that the toys turned back to humans. I'm sure everyone's panicking right about now. Good job. I think we finally finished everything that needs to be done. Good, let's go get Luffy and pound that pink bastard. Ace punched a fist in his hand. I'll stay here with Caesar, and you take her with you. She pointed to the girl who seemed to have not listened to them. Rebecca looked stunned at something with tears streaming down her face. What's wrong now? Sabo sighed. My father, she whispered. I have a father. Mr. Soldier is my father. Oh, right, Ace said, scratching his head. The people who turns into a toys are forgotten. He must have turned back too, then. Mr. Soldier is your dad? Leo asked from Sabo's shoulder. We've been working with Mr. Soldier and Luffy to take down Doflamingo. It must have been dangerous for Luffy, getting all those information to us. I hope he's okay. Viola said he was doing better, but I'm still worried. And that's why we have to hurry, Sabo said. Oh, take this. He picked up a handcuff from the floor with his pipe to Rebecca. See, Stone, you're the only one in this group who can touch it. Get it on that pink bastard when you see an opening. She nodded her head shakily as she wiped her eyes. Wait, Koala handed a shirt and a spare beard over to Ace, who just snatched it while grumbling. With all the chaos of former toys fighting with their tormentors all around them, it was easy enough for them to sneak past. Divided by. When the toys started to turn back to humans during the tournament, Doflamingo ended the match and ordered Luffy to go check on the other executives and help them out if needed. The boy merely nodded and took off to find his family, leaving Doflamingo to deal with the mass panic at the stadium. After checking to make sure everything was okay, he went back to the castle where he knew Doflamingo was currently at. He climbed through the rubble and up to the roof, where he found the man. Sabo was standing next to Doflamingo with his hand tied above his head by the warlord's invisible strings and Ace with a knife pointed at Sabo. Law and Rebecca were standing a little bit away in the same position as Sabo. All three of his brothers were still disguised. Luffy stared in amusement as Law spewed insults at Doflamingo, while Sabo was begging for Ace to stop. He pulled himself the rest of the way up onto the roof. I'm back, Mingo, he said cheerily. Everyone's got everything under control out there. Good, good, Doflamingo grinned. Whatcha doing? Luffy walked towards Law and Rebecca, the latter of whom glared at him. The boy just smiled at her, taking out some trash. Oh, okay, loosen the strings here a bit. Doflamingo watched in great amusement as Luffy made to move Law to stand behind Ace, then pulled Law's sword out and placed it in Law's hand, positioning it to attack the teen in front of him. Then he walked over to stand next to the still-bound Rebecca. Okay, that's better. Then bounced in place, looking excited at what was going to happen. What do you think you're doing? Rebecca shouted at him. There, but it's more fun this way, Luffy grinned, cutting in before she could say anything more. Doflamingo let out a laugh and moved his fingers, causing Ace to stab Sabo and Law to slice Ace. What the man hadn't counted on was for Ace and Sabo to have a devil fruit ability. As soon as they were cut, Ace and Sabo turned into flames, burning the strings attached to them. Law and Rebecca. Who are you? Doflamingo cried out in surprise of having two people going up in flames, glaring at the disguised trio. They smirked at him and took of their disguises. Porcas D. Ace, commander of Whitebeard's 2nd Division. Ace turned his back to show off his tattoo, their winged ASL symbol over Whitebeard's. Just Sabo is fine. Also the commander of the 2nd Division. Sabo held out the back of his left hand to show a tattoo similar to Ace's. Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. He casually pushed away his left side of his buttoned-up shirt to put his hand in his pants pocket, showing his ASL tattoo without Whitebeard's mark over his heart, just inside his tribal heart tattoo. Oh, my turn. Monkey D. Luffy, he had his fists to his sides, looking proud of himself. D, the man said in surprise. You're all DS. Law, you traitor. To think you hid your real name from me. And to think you were hiding with those three the whole time. Tora-san told me how much you feared D carriers, so of course I hid it. Law smirked. I'm not a D. Think I should add it just for the hell of it. Sabo turned to look at Ace, who just shrugged. Why not? And you? Doflamingo pointed at Luffy. You lied to me. No, I didn't. Everyone did get things under control. My family already took down all your executives and underlings. Shanks wants her head. Dad isn't a dragon. He looked genuinely upset about that. Didn't see Grandpops yet. Grandpa is getting all the people onto marine ships and taking your guys to jail. Oh, and there's this really weird guy with sharp eyes and a huge sword that looked bored. He looks familiar though. Oh, and a bunch of the tournament fighters are helping us and warriors that used to be toys. See, everything's under control, Luffy smiled. Besides, I didn't have a choice but to let you do whatever you want. I was walking around with a bomb, Luffy huffed with his arms crossed. Oh, and I'm never lost. I was just using it as an excuse to learn everyone's schedule and draw a map of the castle. He laughed. Who did you say? Doflamingo took a step back with a frown. Law took a key out of his pocket and went over to work on Luffy's anklet as Doflamingo's attention went to Ace and Sabo. He gave Luffy a hug in relief after freeing him. The relief he felt of having Luffy free and hugging him back was immense, so much so that he almost forgot about his thoughts of revenge for Koro-san. Whitebeard, Akagami, Revolutionary Army, and the Marines. Ace grinned as he crossed his arms. Sabo tusked at the man. Really, now? You should have done your research when you kidnapped children. If you did, you might have been able to avoid all this. Better yet, you could have had the whole world in your hands with just 3 children at your disposal. He gave the large man a grin. Who's the weird guy? Luffy tilted his head. Good question, Sabo said. He was already on Shanks's ship when we met up. Something about a party and not having time to drop him off or something. I think Shanks brought him on accident. Luffy quickly pushed Rebecca behind him to another person who just came out of the same hole he just did, just as Doflamingo used his string to throw a large rock at them. Pressed head, protect Rebecca. Law threw the anklet bomb at the rock, causing an explosion in midair and immediately charged after Doflamingo. The warlord cursed as he realized the bomb was no longer on Luffy. Yes, Lucy-senpai. Bartolomeo sputtered and quickly brought up a barrier to cover the both of them, blocking the rocks that came their way. Really, he'd only follow Lucy when he saw his idol. He didn't think he'd get to help. Oh, the happiness. Law charged at Doflamingo with everything he had. Before him is the man who gave him no peace during those years before he met Luffy. The man who enslaved Luffy, the man who killed Koro-san. With Luffy now out of the man's clutches, Law is now free to have his revenge. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy watched as Law attacked. They could only stand there and watch as there was no opening for them to help. Whenever they see an opening, Law would be in the way. There wasn't much they could do until Law was sent flying towards them in the concrete rooftop. That was when Ace and Sabo took their turn, jumping up onto Doflamingo's invisible threads to attack. Luffy ran over to bend over Law with concern in his eyes. What's wrong, Trow? Did you forget about us? When Law tried to get up without answer, intent on fulfilling his revenge, Luffy pushed his brother back onto the ground, sitting on him. Trow, Law's eyes finally settled on Luffy to see tears in his youngest brother's eyes. Luya, he said softly, wiping a stray tear. Trow forgot about us, Luffy sniffled. We're here too. Me, Ace, and Sabo. Reasoning came back to Law. He'd forgotten. They, too, want revenge on the damn pink bastard for ruining their lives, ripping them apart from their loved ones. It wasn't just his life that was ruined because of the man. All 4 of them wanted revenge, and he'd forgotten. There were too many things he's forgetting lately. His time with Whitebeard and the trio made him forget so much of his troubles that he'd forgotten so much. He shook his head and ruffled the boy's hair. I'm sorry, Luya. I'm sorry for forgetting. Now why don't we go help Ace and Sabo in beating Joker? He gave Luffy's hair on last soothing pat before getting up with Luffy. Okay. Luffy gave Law another hug before slinging the both of them up and over to where Ace and Sabo were. Bartolomeo and Rebecca watched the fight in apprehension. Even with 4 against 1, the 2 of them could tell that the warlord had the upper hand. Though Bartolomeo insists that Lucy-senpai wasn't showing his full strength yet to assuage their worry. They watched as the fight went from over the castle to over the rest of the island, all 4 utilizing Doflamingo's invisible strings to their advantage since not one of them could fly to reach the warlord. Though Ace and Sabo could send flying attacks at him. The fight went on for some time when Sabo called out, "Hey, Luffy, watch this." Sabo shaped his left hand to look like a dragon's claw and lit it on fire, before jumping off one of the strings he was standing on, aiming his claws for Doflamingo. Moru Ryusoken, Keen, Ryuo. The warlord dodged the attack at the last second, causing the building behind him to turn burned to dust. Damn it. Uo, Luffy said with wide excited eyes. Sabo can turn into a dragon. Kind of. Ace said, landing beside his youngest brother with a grin. Your dad taught us Ryusoken. Since he couldn't help fight, something about attracting too much attention, he wanted to help out somehow. We both implemented our devil fruit power with what your dad taught us. So dad is a dragon, Luffy said excitedly. Suddenly there was a light blue orb that surrounded the 2 of them, and they were transported a few feet away when Doflamingo sent a haki-infused pillar of tread where they were just moments before. Thanks, Trow, Luffy laughed before blowing into this thumb. Dear Third, Gigant Pistol. Doflamingo was stunned to see how large Luffy's fist had gotten to dodge the attack in time. He was sent soaring towards the castle and wasn't able to dodge the giant bazooka after Luffy seemingly teleported right over him. Instead of crashing into the roof, the warlord was able to save himself by casting a net below to catch him in time. What did crash into the roof was a smaller version of Luffy. Not wanting to be seen in his defenseless form, he ran over to hide behind Bartolomeo's barrier. "Lucy-senpai, what happened?" The green-haired pirate freaked out. "This always happen after I use gear third," the chibai shrugged. "So I'm hiding here until I'm big again. What should I do about this?" Rebecca took out the sea stone cuff from the coat she borrowed from Law, having just now remembering why she was brought there with the trio. "Hey, keep that thing away from me." Bartolomeo took a step away from her. "Don't you know what those things do to fruit users like me?" "Oh, nice. Hold on." He went off to pick up a rock and placed a wooden plank right on top of it. "Done. Put that here." He pointed to the end of the plank that was down. Rebecca hesitantly placed the sea stone where she was told and walked back. Luffy walked towards the other end that was tilted up and looked up. Then all of a sudden, he was his normal size again. Trow. Once he got the attention of his brother, Luffy jumped on the plank, sending the sea stone up and towards Law, who then swung his long sword to bat the cuffs towards Doflamingo's back, while the warlord's attention was on Ace and Sabo. The minute the sea stone touched him, Doflamingo lost control over his strings, sending him crashing into the ground. Luffy made sure to kick the sea stone to lay on top of the man. Law, Ace, and Sabo ran over to the crater the fall made. Bartolomeo and Rebecca came over not too long after. "Rebecca," Luffy called the girl over, "can you put these things on him? I want to make sure it's stuck on him." As sure, she cautiously placed the sea stone cuffs on Doflamingo's wrists. With Law's help, she made it back to their sides. "You know what I really want right now?" Luffy smiled to Doflamingo, standing on the man. "I want Trow to cut you open and pull out your intestines. That's what those things are called, right? So Ace and Sabo can use them to light up pretty fireworks, while you stay right here and watch the rest of your insides turn into pretty sky flowers." "That's a little morbid, Luya," Law said, giving the boy a strange look, while Rebecca looked a little green at the image. "Then, can I hang him with his intestine? Those things are long enough, right?" "I don't think that's the problem here, Luffy," Ace said. "Gramps wants him alive." "Oh, fine, but I'm getting one last hit in," Luffy said determinedly. "I think he's allowed that much," Sabo said, looking to his brothers. "Yeah, you fools," Doflamingo growled at them. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Of course I do. You've told me lots of times." Luffy gave the man a bored look as he readied his fist. "Warlord, works under Kaido, used to be world noble, and now you want revenge on them for something stupid." I think we should step back," Ace said worriedly as Luffy's skin turned pink and steam came out of his body. "Marine Colosseo, grab Rebecca," Sabo called out. "My name is Bartolomeo." The green-haired man yelled back before grabbing the girl by her midsection and running with the brothers. They all screamed as the ground under them caved in. Garp, Dragon, Shanks, and a few Whitebeard commanders stared at the castle before them as the last remaining battles around them were being finished. "You think it's safe to let those kids fight Doflamingo by themselves?" Kairos asked in worry. "Even if Luffy is strong, they're just children." "That's a good question." Izo gave the ensuing battle above the castle a worried look. "Think one of us should go supervise?" Vista asked as he twirled the end of his mustache. "The boys should be fine. Ace and Sabo should be able to handle things up there," Dragon said confidently. "Of course," Garp declared. "Those are my grandchildren." "I didn't mean to go help them out," Vista said as he looked up warily. Riku gave them all a disbelieving look. "Those are just children. Shouldn't you all be more worried or go help them out?" Doflamingo is a very dangerous man who can control people with his strings. He could control one of them to fight for him. "There's no need to worry about those brats, Yoi," Marco said. "You should be more worried about." There was a loud sound of things crashing coming from the roof of the castle, before the whole building came crashing down. The former king and Kairos stared at the ruins of the castle in bewilderment. "Your castle, Yoi. I guess it's too late." "Those damn brats," Garp grumbled, though he had a proud smile on his face. "Don't they know who has to help pay to rebuild that?" Not moments later, they hear the boys arguing with each other. "At least he's still alive," Luffy pouted at Ace, nursing a lump on his head, the only sign of injury on the boy. "You didn't have to take the whole building down with us." Ace yelled at him, sporting various cuts from Doflamingo's haki-infused strings, along with Sabo and Law. "He's lucky I didn't use third gear on him," Luffy grumbled, glaring at the man being dragged out of the rubbles by Law. "That would have been overkill," Law sighed. "Then again, a haki-infused punch while in second gear is also overkill. Isn't that the same move you used to take down that giant in the tournament?" "So, Mingo's a giant pain in my ass," Luffy retorted. He was defenseless. "Luffy," Sabo rubbed his hand over his face. "As much as I hate the man, punching him that hard while unable to move and already down is just wrong. A regular pistol punch would have been fine." "Overkill is that?" Luffy pointed to a building where the Marines were working to put out the fire. Sabo's fault, Ace said with a blush. Definitely Sabo's fault, Law agreed. How is that my fault? Ace did that. Sabo yelled at the two. It just is, Ace huffed, sending a glare at Sabo. And because of that stupid call of yours, I burned a few toy people just to get out faster. They both looked to Luffy, who just yelped in pain, only to do the same, along with Law. What was that for? Law exclaimed, nursing a lump on his head from Garp, dropping his hold on Doflamingo. That was for property damage. Who do you think has to pay for all the mess you boys caused? Garp roared. None of the damages were even caused by me. Those were all your grandsons, Law retorted. And who are you? Garp asked the remaining two that followed out from the rebels. Bartolomeo, Mafia boss, the man said, looking down on the vice admiral. What's it to you? And how dare you hit Luffy senpai? Mafia, pirates, you're all the same. Garp sent a haki-infused punch on Bartolomeo's head before the Mafia boss could create a barrier, sending him crashing to the ground. How I discipline my grandson is none of your business. And you, Rebecca. The girl looked behind the man to see her father and the former king looking at her with wide eyes. Father, grandfather. She ran over to give them a hug. Kairos then walked over to Luffy with his daughter and Riku. The former king held out his hand to the boy, who gave him a handshake with a grin. I would like to thank you for saving Dressrosa. I have heard much about you from Kairos and your part in the plan. You have put yourself in much danger for us. For that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, the man said gratefully, to which Luffy laughed at. All I did was give Mr. Soldier information. He did the rest. All I wanted was to take down Mingo. Riku shook his head at the boy's generosity. Is there any way I can repay you? Food. Lots of food. I'm hungry. Luffy held his stomach as it let out a loud growl, echoed by Ace and Sabo, who blushed. Izo walked up to the group and grabbed Luffy's arm. Food later. We need to get you checked and you three bandaged. Food first, please. Luffy begged nervously. No, check up first. Then you can eat, the kimono-wearing man said as he dragged a protesting Luffy back to their ship that was relocated closer to the island. Thatch is already working on some snacks for you. You can eat more at the party later. The boy dug his feet into the ground and Izo stretched the arm he was pulling. I don't wanna. Dad, help me. He turned to the person he wanted to spend more time with for help, thinking his dad would want the same. Dragon looked to Garp, who had slung Doflamingo's unconscious form over his shoulder. Your son. You deal with him. I have to get back to headquarters with this guy and pretend I didn't see any of you lot. And Garp walked away from them towards the marine ship that was waiting for him. But first, I have to get the civilians off my ships. With a sigh, Dragon walked over to Luffy and picked him in the same manner Garp had Doflamingo. Sorry, son, but this is for your own good. Oh, is that the stuff I told you to get from Caesar? Luffy asked when Law handed the files to Izo. Shouldn't they go to Grandpops or Pops? Why would files concerning your health go to them? Law asked. The boy paled and struggled a little more when Law handed Izo the file they had gotten from Caesar's lab. Those weren't the files you were supposed to get. You were supposed to find the stuff about whatever Mingo wanted Caesar to make. Ops, Sabo said and pointed towards a burnt and destroyed building. Izo turned his head to glare at the struggling boy, waving the file at him. This is more important. As your doctors, Kobato and I have the right to know everything that's going on with your body. If not for your health, then for the safety of everyone on Moby. That had the boy slump in defeat. The head doctor was right. He had to keep his family safe, especially from himself. The fight with Diamante told him that much. Divided by. Kobato nearly tore the papers apart in anger as she read through them. You, she pointed at the boy. Bed. Now, they were in the 2nd Division commander's room since there wasn't much room to move around in the infirmary with all the injured pirates. Ace, Sabo, and Law had brought all the equipment Izo thought was necessary after being bandaged up. Not liking how angry the normally meek woman was, Luffy laid on the bed. She went on to prod and poked him, checking his temperature, and anything else she thought to do. Once she was done, she frowned and sighed. Law, who had been helping, stood by Ace, Sabo, and Dragon to hear her diagnosis. Though, Law already knows what she's going to say. Luckily, the experiments were only on expanding your haki. The only problem I see in the future regarding that is the fluctuation of your haki before it settles. Unfortunately, I don't know how long that will take. She the motion to Law. I don't know much about haki, but Law or Izo can fill you in on what to expect later. Luffy nodded, even though he didn't really understand, but trust Law to explain it to him. Right now, I'm more concerned about the drugs administered. Luffy twitched at the mention of the drugs. He didn't know what they gave him, but he knew to expect the withdrawal symptoms. It shouldn't be as bad as the last time, or so he hoped. They wanted to get me to talk, say things, like where I've been, even though they knew I was on Pop's ship, who I was with, if I'm hiding anything, stuff like that. Didn't work, I think. Passed out a few times after. There was this one time I woke up in Mingo's room. Don't remember how I got there. What happened with your fight with Diamante? Law asked. Right before the fight, Gassy did something and I don't know what happened. I just wanted to kill everything I saw. Luffy scrunched his face and thought. And it made me a lot more powerful. It was really hard to control. I see, so. She trailed off, unsure of how to word it. Well, with your haki going haywire, it may be best to put you in a holding cell until the symptoms subside. You're going to put my son in a cell? Dragon asked in disbelief at what they're asking of his son. It's going to have to be one with sea stone, Ace said looking at Dragon. For the safety of the crew. When he was younger, it wasn't so bad because he wasn't as strong. But now, he could easily hurt. Or worse, kill someone without meaning to. There were a few times when Luffy would, I guess, throw a tantrum. And it's always hard to get him to calm down without hurting anyone, Sabo explained. It's okay, Dad, Luffy said as he sat up on his bed. Everyone here takes good care of me. I don't want to hurt them on accident. Dragon just sighed in resignation. I'd like to spend some time with my son before I leave. Kobato nodded. You won't be showing signs of withdrawal for at least a few more days. Thatch will let you know when your snacks are ready. Yeah, I'm taking Dad to our room, Luffy said and jumped up to push the desk out of the way. They all left the two to catch up on lost time. As Kobato, Ace, Sabo, and Law walked down the hall, they ran into Thatch. Hey, how's the brat? Snacks are done. I'm on my way to report to Pops. You can get your update there. He has lost weight, though, Kobato said tiredly. And he's spending time with his dad right now. Give them an hour. Viola, who had just walked out of the infirmary where she was helping to tend the injured, overheard. That shouldn't be. He ate everything that was given to him, and we fed him quite well. Yeah, but how much did you feed him and what? Thatch raised an eyebrow. We gave him the same as what the family executives would eat. And he would ask for snacks in between meals, she answered, looking confused and worried. The first month or so he would ask for seconds. So normal portions for normal people, Thatch concluded. What kinds of snack? Fresh fruits. Did you prepare the meals? No, our meals were prepared by Monet. Is something wrong? She asked when she saw Ace and Sabo pale. Luffy eats enough to feed at least 10 full-grown men, plus snacks. I'm surprised he didn't demand more food, especially when it sounded like he was treated so well considering he was technically a prisoner, Sabo said. Thatch, more food. Ace grabbed the head cook and shook him frantically. Wow, calm down there. Thatch stopped the shaking. He can eat as much as he wants during the party. I'll make sure there's enough for him. He was so compliant the whole time. I didn't realize, Viola said worriedly. If he had said something, I'm sure we could have gotten him more food easily. Kobato placed a hand on Viola's shoulder. Don't worry about it. It's not your fault. That would be Luffy's own doing. And just so you know, compliant isn't a word we would normally associate with that boy. We know him as a troublemaking, selfish brat. He does what he wants. You are not to blame. If anything, she glared at Ace and Sabo. It's their fault for raising him that way. And he turned out great, they both said, looking proud of themselves, only to be smacked on the back of their heads by Law. That wasn't a praise. You're not any better, Kobato reprimanded him. You spoil him just as much, these idiots. If it's like that, Marco said as he walked past them, on his way to his room, then you should blame everyone here. The whole crew spoils the brat. With that he closed the door to his room to finish up some work. As much as he wanted to see Luffy right now and give him a huge hug, he has to tend to his division duties and part of Division 2 since Ace and Sabo still hasn't gotten the hang of everything yet. The only thing that's stopping him from barging in on Luffy right then and there was the fact that his boy was home. Divided by. Luffy, snacks are ready, Thatch called out in the galley an hour later. Food. They hear the boy cheering from right under them. A door opened from the floorboards and Dragon climbed up with Luffy, now wearing a yellow dress and his straw hat, hanging off his dad's back. He jumped off once they were out. The man gave the other 3 teens considering look. You boys need a new hobby. It's bordering creepy. Ace and Sabo gave him a knowing grin. You can't have him back, you know. He belongs to us now, they both said. You two are the creepiest, Dragon said as he sighed and took a seat next to his son. It's almost as if you two are one person in 2 bodies. I think they're secretly twins, Koala commented. Bet they can communicate telepathically, too. I'm inclined to think it's because they share the same devil fruit, Izo said. They weren't so in sync with each other before then. Luffy, eat slower. No one's going to steal your food. The only thing they had in common before the fruit was their abnormal obsession with your kid. I'm surprised you haven't commented on his dress, Law said timidly, a little afraid of the intimidating man he's meeting for the first time. There's an Akama queen working for the Revolutionary Army, was all the explanation Dragon gave. I think the dress looks cute on him, Koala gushed, and we were already expecting it. Those two, she gave Ace and Sabo a look of disgust, showed us pictures after pictures of mostly Luffy in dresses. You weren't joking about the amount of food he eats, Viola said as she watched the amount of food Luffy consumed. That's just snack, Kobato said. He has an abnormally high metabolism. That may be the cause of his stunted growth, coupled with malnutrition at a very young age. It's the reason why Thatch personally prepares the food for the kids. He's in charge of their nutritional intakes. I'm also the head cook here. I'm not about to let anyone live on this ship hungry. Nor am I going to let the lack of food be the reason anyone is sick, Thatch said proudly. Ace and Sabo watched Luffy eat, happy that he was back. And Sabo noticed something. Did you give Luffy a bath? He asked Dragon with a surprised look. Dragon nodded. He needed one. How did you get him to stay in the bathroom until you got clothes on him? They both slammed their hands on the table and leaned over to Dragon. The man furrowed his eyes in confusion. He just kept talking nonstop about what he's done while on the ship. Luya has a habit of running out of the bath before even getting dried, Law explained. The sound of tiny cheers called attention to their new visitors, cutting off Dragon's response. The Tontatas clung on various parts of Luffy's clothing in a hug. Luffy, we're so glad you're okay, Leo said. Kairos, Rebecca, and Riku followed in after the little people. We thought you were going to die, Flapper said, tears streaming down his face. I'm fine. See, Luffy laughed. Did you find your man Princess? Princess Manchuri, Leo corrected him. Yes, we did. A small girl walked up to Luffy's plate and bowed. Thank you for helping my people. He'd make a great revolutionary, kid. You just saved a whole kingdom, a very selfless act. Maybe you should come back with your father, Hack suggested. Luffy just tilted his head in thought. I didn't really care about saving the kingdom. I just wanted to mess with Mingo without getting myself in trouble. I met Leo, and he said he wants to save a princess. Then Mr. Soldier came and said he wants to take out Sugar so he can be human again. And I knew you guys were going to come, so I used them to get you information, especially about Virgo, Viola corrected. In case you called Gramps. I was lucky that Mingo was letting me go wherever I wanted. I pretended to get lost and spied on lots of people. Luffy laughed. Told you Luffy was selfish. Ace grinned at everyone's, minus the Whitebeard pirates, gobsmacked look. For Doflamingo to be that trusting towards anyone was very strange. He trusts no one, not even the top executives, Viola said. He was very off guard around Luffy. Rebecca nodded. I was sure you were on his side. It almost looked like he was caring for you like he would his own child. How did you do that? How did you get him to trust you like that? I don't know. I just did whatever he wanted. Next thing I know, Mingo was spending lots of time with me. You two spent a lot of time reading in the library, Viola pointed out. How were you gathering information like that? I wasn't really reading. I wanted to know where everyone goes every day. That was the best place to keep track of everyone. And I wanted Mingo to know I wasn't doing anything wrong. So I stayed where he can see me. What does Pizza, Caesar, Law corrected, have to do with anything? Sabo asked. You wanted him alive, so I had a very hard time dealing with him. Oh, the gas guy. Mingo kept going on and on about how Kaido had his back or something and that Gassy was doing secret work for him. I remembered Trow saying to cover all bases. So I thought to use Gassy if this Kaido guy comes after us. Good thinking, Luya. Law ruffled the boy's hair. You did a lot of thinking, didn't you? Yeah, I don't like it. Hurts my head. Luffy scrunched up his face in disgust. That's great that you listened and all, but didn't we also tell you to be careful and to not do anything dangerous? Sabo said. He had a smile on, but everyone there knew he wasn't happy. That's right. Do you know how worried we were when Pops found our ship in the middle of nowhere, and you weren't on it? We all thought you fell over and drowned. Luckily, Trow told us there was someone who could fly working for the Pink Bastard. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known to come. Care to explain? Ace said with a scowl. Monet and Pisca threatened you guys, so I had to go with them. Luffy whined as if a child not getting the candy he wanted. We could have taken care of ourselves, Luya. Or do you not trust Whitebeard and everyone else to be strong enough? Law asked. No, I know everyone is strong, but I didn't want Mingo to come after us later. What if when I leave home to find One Piece, he attacks you guys or my crew? What if not everyone on my crew is strong or they can't fight? I don't know if I'd be able to protect them all, Luffy said as if it were a well-known fact. Kingdu, who had just walked past their table, stopped in shock and quickly ran out back to the deck. Everyone, rejoice. The runt used his brain. There was a shocked silence before everyone on deck cheered loudly. What? The brat has brains. They could hear Shanks exclaim through the cheers, before he joined in the cheering. Then there was a couple of thuds. The party is later. Get back to work. We need to restock the ship before we leave in the morning, they heard Marco say. Pops, Luffy cheered before running out the galley to find Marco. Speaking of which, Thatch said, pushing himself up from his seat, I need to finish preparing for tonight's party. We need to leave also. Dragon got up from his seat, followed by Koala and Hack. Thank you all for taking great care of my son. I will see Whitebeard before we leave to thank him also. This has got to be the weirdest group of pirates I have ever met, Riku said, amusement clear in his voice. Are you really leaving so soon? Viola asked. We have to, Izo answered. The Marines will be back to help rebuild your kingdom. We've already caused enough trouble for Garp. He's already have to think of a story to keep his men out of trouble. If anyone finds out that they worked with pirates, they would be in trouble, Sengoku included. Divided by. The entire island joined in on the party. Kairos had gone around earlier with the former king to inform everyone who to thank for freeing them from Doflamingo. More than half of the people crowded around Luffy to thank him, as if everything were his idea. This greatly annoyed the boy, as all he wanted to do was to get to the food. At one point, he even resorted to yelling at the people, "I'm not a hero. Stop calling me that. I'm a pirate. Give me my food." Once he finally reached where Thatch set up his cooking area, Luffy took to hiding behind one of his many brothers just so he could eat in peace. He liked parties. He liked being around people, but he really didn't like be kept away from food, especially when he's super hungry. "There you are, kid." Luffy tensed behind Law before he recognized the voice as Shanks. He turned to look around his brother to see the man. "Shanks," he yelled as he ran over to give the man a hug. Then he looked to see the other man staring at him with strange gold eyes. Then it clicked. "I remember you," Luffy pointed. "Mingo made me watch lots of recordings with you fighting." Shanks and Thatch paled at that, and the man next to him looked curious. "Why would he have you do that?" Luffy looked at the man thoughtfully before answering. "Because you're the greatest swordsman in the world." "That answers nothing," the man scoffed. "I'm more interested in how he got the recording," Shanks said. "Oh yeah, Luffy, this is Dracula Mihawk, right?" "A hawk," Luffy nodded. "So how do you cut down a huge ship without breaking your sword?" "When I tried it, the sword broke into tiny pieces." "Is it because you used that huge black one on your back?" "You managed to use my attack." "Yeah, Mingo said to cut down this one marine ship, so I did." "Broke the sword though?" Luffy looked put off at the thought of breaking the sword. "Luffy," Ace smacked the boy on his head. "You don't say things like that to people." "But why?" Luffy said with his hand on his head. "He's Shanks's friend, right? That means he's a good guy." "Luffy, did you get enough to eat?" Sabo asked. The boy nodded happily. "Then, how about a dance?" He gestured to the bonfire where people were already dancing. "Okay." The two left the others to clear up the mess Luffy caused. "That boy is dangerous to have around," Mihawk said, eyes never leaving the boy. "Oh, we know that," Thatch said with a smile. "But he's a good kid. Here, have something to eat. Don't think about it too much. We're here to help guide him in the right direction." "If it helps any," Ace said, "it's not something he can control. He can't unsee what's been shown to him." "Blame the pink bastard. He's the one that did that to Luffy. Something about wanting an army of strong fighters or something. Too bad for him, lose the only one that survived." "I heard that he defeated Diamante single-handedly," Thatch said proudly. "Bet he could have taken down everyone else too. So glad he didn't do that and had the right mind to wait for us," Law sighed. "He's just one person, a very small person. Taking on all the executives and Joker all at once by himself would have been suicidal. His talent is one thing, but I'm speaking of his ability to get in Doflamingo's favor." The former royal guards that were in the dungeon with the boy were talking about how Doflamingo seemed to pamper the boy. Mihawk said, "Doflamingo doesn't seem like the kind of person to pamper anyone." "That is true," Shanks said. "Who would pamper their prisoner anyway?" They stood there talking for a while, people coming and going, eating and having fun. Then Sabo came running at them, carrying Luffy in his arms, looking panicked. "Where's Izo or Kobato?" he demanded before anyone could ask what happened. They all looked at Luffy's sweaty face and the way the boy's arms were wrapped around his stomach. "I saw Izo earlier over there." Thatch pointed to a direction. "Kobato should still be on the ship." Ace, Law, and Shanks took off after Sabo to the ship. "What happened?" Kobato exclaimed upon seeing the state Luffy's in. "I'm not sure. We were dancing, and then he said he was hungry again. He saw a food stall and wanted to try it. We ate some, and then he said he wasn't feeling good. Halfway to getting back to Thatch to find you, he doubled over and complained of stomach pains," Sabo explained as Kobato led them to the same room they used earlier for Luffy's checkup. As soon as he laid Luffy on the bed, the boy rolled over to the side and hurled. It was only a small content of what he had eaten that day, but it was the blood that accompanied that worried everyone. The boy only rolled back onto his back and panted, pain evident on his face. "I want everyone, but Law, out. This room is too cramped for us to work with so many people," Kobato said tersely. Not even 30 minutes later, the door opened to reveal Law, looking worried. Marco, Thatch, and Mihawk had joined them sometime during then. As he opened the door wider for him to walk out, they all saw Luffy asleep on the bed, with Kobato quietly tucking him in. Instead of waiting, Marco barged his way into the room. "What's wrong?" Sabo asked. "The idiot didn't tell anyone that they've been lacing his food with poison." "Not with the intent to kill him, but to make him immune to them," Law growled as he punched a nearby wall. He continued once he had his emotion under control. "The poison eroded the lining of his stomach, causing him some problems digesting some food. Whatever he ate at the vendor had too much oil and grease for his stomach to handle. That's why he was fine with Thatch's food." The head cook nodded in understanding. "That's right. I don't use anything too fatty for you boys or much seasoning. letting the flavor and nutrient of the ingredients do all the work. Best to not let anyone else know for now. Let the people enjoy themselves and not worry about Luffy, Kobato said as she exited. He needs the rest right now anyway. They all looked in the room once more before leaving to see a defeated-looking Marco sitting on a chair next to Luffy's bed, petting the boy's hair. That night when the 3 older boys came to check up on Luffy, they found Marco sleeping on the bed with Luffy's face buried in the man's chest. Shrugging, the 3 ended up sleeping together on the floor just so they could be close to their youngest brother. Divided by. By the time they departed the next morning, Luffy was still sleeping. Before he woke up, the entire ship had been briefed about his condition. At least now no one would panic if they randomly fell asleep from his haki going out of control. Law, Ace, and Sabo would sleep outside of the cell at night with him. The second day, Luffy could feel himself feeling twitchy and a little irritated, so he walked himself into a special cell set up for him, with Haruto locking the door behind him apologetically. There would always be a commander there to watch him and keep him company. Every so often, other crew members would come to check up on him and talk to him, telling him the going-ons on the ship. The third day, Law, Ace, and Sabo came down with the newspaper in hand. They excitedly told him about their new bounty. They held up their own to show him. The 3 of them smiled happily at the cameraman. The picture looked like it was taken during the party, but they didn't know when the picture was taken. None of them remember posing for it. Then they showed him his. It was a picture of him dancing happily in his dress. That's funny, Luffy laughed. My bounty is higher than your guys. That's probably because they heard that you took down Diamante on your own, Sabo grinned. I like that they put a D in my name. Must be Gramps doing. Yeah, but then they took it off mine. Law looked confused. Your name is too long, Ace laughed. Trafalgar D. Water
This is
Law.
a simulation
No
game
room
set
for
in
all
a
that.
virtual world
The article also
and
says
does
3
not
out of 4 of
represent
us are the
real
ASL
life.
trio, but
Please
they can't
play in
figure out which one of
moderation.
you 2
I
is
need a
ill.
weapon.
Sabo
Breaks
laughed. We
and
both
play
are. Luffy
responsibly.
I need a
decided.
weapon.
Me and Trow can take turns.
I need a
That would be
weapon.
fun. That would certainly confuse the Marines. What with one of us being of different height each time? Law grinned. I want a tattoo too, Luffy said suddenly. The same one Trow got. During his couple months in the cell, he had a few violent outbreaks. The commanders on watch each time could only watch on in sympathy, though they enjoyed the reaction from Caesar, who was in the cell next to Luffy. The gas man would scramble as far as he could from the boys' cell and scream in fear, sometimes crying like a baby. There was once when it was just Jazu watching him, when Luffy asked if everyone was okay, worriedly. Of course, they are. Why are you asking? Because everyone's flickering on and off. Jazu laughed and assured the boy it was because of his haki and told him to not panic when they all disappear from his senses. Your haki will be back in working order in no time. He was let out after a week of no violent outburst, even though his haki was still not back to normal. By the time Luffy was free of his cell, everyone on Moby had gotten used to their random naps. Someone even admitted to the boy, "Now, I know how Ace feels when his nap attacks happen." Divided by. One morning Marco found Luffy trying to shake his brothers awake through the bars, looking panicked. "What's wrong, Yoi?" he asked alarmed. Luffy gave him a relieved smile before he went back to looking panicked. "Is everyone okay? I can't sense anyone." Marco crouched down to ruffle the boy's hair. "It's probably just your observation haki shutting down." He looked to Caesar for clarification. Yes, the guy answered in annoyance. "He's probably over his withdrawals too, so just get him as far away from me as possible." The commander just gave the prisoner a glare and unlocked Luffy's cell, kicking the other 3 awake on the way. Marco "See, everyone's fine, Yoi." He then walked them over and set Luffy on the captain's lap. "I don't like it," Luffy mumbled as he was buried in his grandpop's lap. "What is it you don't like, child?" Whitebeard asked. "I don't like when I can't sense everyone. It's scary." His voice cracked as he tried to hold back his tears. "And lonely." Whitebeard picked the boy up and sat him up properly, so that he could see the entire deck. "Look at everyone, Luffy." Everyone who were awake and on deck waved at the boy with a smile, happy to see him out again. "We're all doing fine. No one is hurt. We're all here with you. There's no reason for you to be lonely when you're home. Why don't you sit here with me, where you can see your family easily, until breakfast is ready?" Marco, Law, Ace, and Sabo ended up sitting there on the upper deck with them. As soon as a crew member woke up and heard that Luffy was with Whitebeard, they went to greet the boy. Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed the video just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.